call.
Here. Gray.
You're not on.
Harding. Here. Melton. Here. Palermo. Here. Brennan. Here. Mr. President.
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for opening remarks.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, it's hard to believe that just a week ago, the temperatures were around 20 below zero. Here we are in balmy Omaha. I'd just like to say that this time of year when temperatures moderate and the snow melts and we're probably a few weeks away from the daffodils popping up, it just fills me with a renewed sense of optimism and how appropriate it is today that after a long winter, so to speak, about a project in the heart of the city that's been in decline for decades, that we're having the optimism of a briefing on bright things hopefully to come at Crossroads. And how exciting I know I am to hear the project and what's coming to be proposed, and how apropos it is that the season is spring will soon be here. So, thank you.
An affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you to this meeting of the Omaha City Council. Again, we thank you for being here. But as a courtesy to those in attendance and to facilitate the conduct of our business, we ask that you please turn off or silence all electronic devices.
Items 6 and 7 can be considered together for Antler View Replat 4, located southwest of Big Elk Parkway and West Maple Road. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Items 6 and 7, resolutions to approve the preliminary plat and final plat for Antler View Replat 4.
The public hearing on items 6 and 7 begin at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? We have a Zoom registrant, Andrew Koster, representing the applicant from TD2. Mr. Koster, you're recognized. As soon as we unmute you, that is. There you go.
Hi, yeah, this is Andrew Koster with TD2. I'm just here available if anybody has any questions about the project.
Thank you. The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Brennan. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 6 and 7 are approved, 7-0.
One public hearing can be held for items 8 and 9 for the Crossroads located northwest of 72nd and Dodge Streets. Item 8, a resolution to approve the preliminary plat for the Crossroads with waivers to Section 5399 Sidewalks and Section 53914 Green Corners. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval with waivers. Item 9, a resolution to approve the Crossroads Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan in an amount up to $79,400,000.
Before we open the public hearing, we'll hear first from the mayor, Gene Stothert, then we'll hear from Planning Department, the project developers, and then the public hearing will open. Madam Mayor. Welcome.
Thank you. Jean Stothert, Mayor of Omaha, 1819 Farnham. Good afternoon, President Jerem and council members. It has certainly been a long road to get Crossroad applications before you for your approval today, but every stop and every turn and every detour will definitely be worth it. Our partnership with Lockwood and Century Development builds on the momentum that we are experiencing throughout Omaha. Your vote today is a vote of confidence in Frank Krejci and Chip James and their record of successful development in Omaha. This great and important corner at 72nd and Dodge has a tremendous future. The Crossroads will become a commercial, residential, entertainment, and leisure destination at the true crossroads of our city. Without our support and your approval of the TIF application, this project will not move forward. It is a textbook example of how TIF is used to create growth and opportunities throughout development. Omaha has a record of successful TIF projects with proven benefits. The Crossroads will benefit our city in many ways. It will lead to more development along the Dodge Street corridor. It will offer new retail, housing, and entertainment options, and public spaces for all to use. I ask you for your support today. Thank you.
Thank you. Planning Department, Bridget Hadley, did you wish to go next? Or project team? Mr. Boozer, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Boozer, is there hand sanitizer up there?
There is.
Okay, you might want to give it to the mayor.
Well equipped. Jim Bouger, 10250 Regency Circle, Suite 300, on behalf of the applicant, which is KJ Crossroads Venture. First of all, unexpected visit from the mayor today, and as the development team, want to express our thanks for the mayor's support and her showing up here today. I've worked on a lot of nice projects in this city, and it's the first time I've had the pleasure of the mayor coming to council meetings, so wonderful to see her and have her support on this. I have with me today also Jessica Thomas from my office. As alluded to, Chip James is here from Lockwood Development, as well as Jude Beller, Emily O'Connor, Bob Begley, and Steve Buckley. From Century Development, Frank Krejci and his son Bob Krejci are here. From HBA, Kurt Caesar is here, and Kurt's going to say a few words and lead us through the presentation of the pretty pictures and some of the engineering and talk about the project in general and what it looks like and the challenges we faced along the way. Lamprey Anderson Associates, Terry Atkins and Joe Flaxbeard are here. Not present today, we have another engineering group. Olson is here, and Doug Helvers and Kellen Heidemann made great contributions to our project. So the part of the discussion I'm going to lead today is really the entitlement portion. Bridget Hadley is going to lead off a discussion on the TIF portion of our project today. But as to the preliminary plat and the waivers that we're seeking, there's a sidewalk and a green corner provisions that we're asking for waivers on, and those are the entitlement requests that are before the council today. First of all, I want to say that the city has provided a number of comments and recommendations on the project, which our development team has been and will continue to work through closely with the city and the city staff. We've been having weekly meetings for quite some time on the project, and we've really delivered, had a very collaborative effort in getting to the point where we are today, and some of the pictures that you're going to see and some that you're going to see in the future as we bring this project home. So we will be back here. This is for preliminary plat. We will be back to council again on probably a revised preliminary plat and a final plat, and the actual zoning, which is going to be a mixed-use zoning with an ACI2 overlay. So those will be the subject of future public meetings, and we've been working really hard on a lot of the mixed-use aspects. As the mayor alluded to, this is not just a retail development, is inclusive of residential housing. There's a lot of apartment units. There's a hotel concept. There's an entertainment concept. So it's a true mixed-use center. There's extensive plaza areas that Kurt's going to show you and run through that are going to make this really an attractive and a gathering place for our city, which is, probably the most iconic intersection that we have in the city, the 72nd and Dodge intersection. So one of the items that we don't have in front of you today, there was a waiver that the developer had requested, which was a sidewalk waiver west of 75th Avenue. So there was an initial comment by the city staff for denial of that sidewalk waiver. As we've been working through some of the street sections and some of the connectivity throughout the development, we've actually worked on a plan that the city staff is going to support in our revised preliminary plat and final plat process, a waiver of that sidewalk requirement. And I'm not going to speak for the city because I did talk to Dave and Eric at the planning department. I think they're going to comment on that and verify what I'm telling you, that they will support that waiver on the next go around. So, and that is important for our project. So, as the mayor alluded to, again, this project's been a long time in developing. Mr. Krejci purchased this ground over 10 years ago, and which would not be an enormous task for some people, but Mr. Krejci's 96 years young, and so he is not exactly wanting to have been sitting around on this for a long time, and so he's pretty excited to finally get here to see what this can become, and he's got a great partner in Chip, who's delivered and developed a number of great projects throughout our city, including Sterling Ridge, which I worked on closely with Chip. So I think what you're going to see is a pretty spectacular project. It's a legacy project for Mr. Krejci and for Mr. James, and I think for our city as well. With that, I just do want to say thanks to a few other people that have really helped us along the way to bring forth some of the pictures and some of the tough work, engineering work for the project. Pinnacle Bank has been a great supporter, Project Advocates, Field PLE Architecture, Mark Foster Gage Architecture, Avant Architecture, OBI Creative, and Walker Parking have all contributed greatly to what you're going to see here today and what you're going to see develop at 72nd and Dodge, which is going to be a really spectacular project. So thank everybody from the private sector. Also need to obviously thank the mayor's office, city planning, public works, the law department, finance department, and the council representatives whose district surround this area, who we've included and been taking public comments from, so that we're attuned to what's going on in the community and what the community's desires are to see developed at this site. So with all that, it's a true private-public partnership, and we're grateful for the contributions of the city as well in the project. So with that, I'm turn it over to Mr. Caesar, who's going to lead us through a presentation of some of the details of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boozer. Mr. Caesar, can we have your name and address, please?
Yes, Kurt Caesar, Holland Basham Architects, 119 South 49th Ave. I'm going to open up a presentation here really quick. You're fine. I was hoping to make that full screen. There we go. All right, I'm going to dig into, as Jim said, some of the pretty pictures here. And there's a lot of work that's gone into, I'm going to take this off, it's a little warm. Hard to believe I'm saying that a week after last week. A couple of key words come to mind that have already been said, iconic and destination. And I think the image that's up on the screen is exactly what the Crossroads was in 1960. So this is an image of the Crossroads in 1960. You're seeing, see if I can point here, there's 72nd and Dodge Street there. You're seeing, this is actually during Christmas, you're seeing the Christmas trees sitting there on the south portion of the parking lot. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. But what you are seeing is a parking lot full of vehicles. This was an active destination. And I think over time, obviously we've seen that kind of slow and dwindle, and it's actually really very exciting to see this important intersection of Omaha, 72nd and Dodge Street, become a new and improved iconic destination. So with that, you see, here's what we're looking at moving forward. So we're hoping to bring a whole slew of future connections to this development and to this intersection in the city of Omaha. I'm going to start with the basics. We're going to start at the horizontal level and then begin to go vertical and talk about some of the programming later in the presentation here. Just if you're counting, there's only 10 slides, so we're three slides through. So we'll start here with the existing. We think it's smart to start here just to kind of understand what it is that exists there today. Obviously, a lot of us that grew up in Omaha, myself included, have driven past this property my entire 41 years living here in Omaha. That said, I never really understood it as being as big as it really is. This is a 40-acre site that includes almost 10 city blocks. So you have Cass on the north, Dodge on the south, 72nd Street to the east, and what we're calling 75th Ave, well, will become 75th Ave on the west. So just to kind of locate you, the existing Charleston's is sitting here along Dodge Street. One of the hardships of the site, and you may be familiar, but there's a lot of grade on this site, believe it or not. You may experience it or have experienced it if you've walked through the mall. There's varying levels and varying entrance levels throughout, but we'll talk in a little bit here once we get into the vertical world of the site. But there's also a retaining wall here that runs north-south that was kind of dividing Steers and what was the old Best Buy. There's about a 10-foot grade change just right there. Ideally, in the future development, we're trying to soften any of that grade and minimize the use of any walls and construction that would deter any sort of movement from east to west, north to south. But we do have about 30 feet of grade change from east to west and about 20 feet on average from north to south. So I mentioned that the property here is roughly 40 acres, 10 city blocks. We put together this very quick infographic to explain really what that means in terms of overall scale, and I'm going to try to zoom in here. Oops, that didn't work. Okay, we'll start here. This is a little hard to see, but this is the same 40 acres dropped over Exarban Village. So you'll see that that includes Blue Cross Blue Shield, HDR's new tower along with a parking garage, what I call Zone 5, Pacific Life, and Right at Home, and even a little bit of Stinson Park. Midtown Crossing.
Mr. Caesar, could
Yes.
you minimize our city clerk, deputy clerk's Zoom?
Minimize, excuse me.
Yeah, she can do it for you. Hold on.
Okay. Oh,
It should
minimize
be-
this.
Yeah, I think it should be,
Is that better?
I think you can drag it down though, too. There you go, there you go,
Okay.
there you go.
All right.
Thank you.
No problem. Looking at Midtown Crossing, I had the delight to actually work on this project. Again, 40 acres basically covers that entire 1 million square feet of development. I'm going to move over to downtown. This is where we are today, sitting in City Hall, stretching from 19th Street east to 15th Street, from Harney almost to Dodge. Within that area, you have the First National Tower, the Woodman Tower, and City Hall. I think one of the more relatable 40-acre areas of the city is the Old Market. So we have 10th Street on the east, 15th on the west, Farnham on the north, and Jackson to the south. I think this is a great example because I think a lot of us can put ourselves down there and understand the walking distance from one side of that to another. That's the equivalent to what we're looking at the crossroads. So I think that's just a good baseline to understand as we start to look at some of the broader development. And I'm going to try to figure out how to zoom out here. Is there a keyboard? There we go. There we go. Okay. So we're going to look at the site development plan. Again, we're going to live still in the horizontal world here for a few more slides. What you're seeing here in orange is the vehicular path that we've defined for the new Crossroads development. And you can see really what we're trying to do at its base level is reintroduce the city grid system back into the overall development. We've worked with city staff since this was submitted to work through what a lot of these right-of-ways and these street sections look like since this diagram here, but I think it's important to understand just the overall road system and some of the entry points that will remain as well as what will be new moving forward. So I'm going to run through those really quick. Along Dodge Street, we've got 74th Street, that primary entrance that exists today will still exist in the future. We've got Capitol Street, which will be reintroduced into the development, along with Chicago Street, both east-west directions. We see Chicago Street, if I move east to 72nd, 72nd Chicago. There is a light here today, but we do see this in its existing state today. I shouldn't say today, maybe a few months ago prior to demo starting. This was very much a service-oriented entrance to the development. This is going to be a key entrance into the overall Crossroads development in the future. We really see that this will have a tremendous amount of impact and use based upon the existing infrastructure of this existing parking garage staying. Maybe that's one thing I didn't mention before when I was looking at the overall property. Let me go back a second. You're seeing this letter A. So there's Target and Target's parking lot. That is not included as a part of the project. But the existing parking garage will maintain its current state with some improvements. Moving west on Cass Street, there will be an entrance on 74th Ave that will align north to 74th Ave across from Cass Street. The existing Sears entrance, which exists right here almost at about 75th Street, we're shifting that entrance west, and that will be a through street, 75th Ave, from Dodge all the way to Cass Street. Now we're going to take a look at really what makes this development exciting, and it's the pedestrian realm. At its basis as well, we're really trying to accentuate the pedestrian involvement throughout this entire development. So all this purple that you're seeing represents the sidewalk connections as well as the plaza connections. So these thicker lines that you're seeing here in the middle, Jim mentioned them, but these are the public spaces that will be connecting the heart of this development from one block to the next. It's hard to get your head around the scale of these a little bit in this type of diagram, but there's on average about 60 feet between both of these buildings. That's a tremendous amount of space for public gathering. One of the other things from a pedestrian standpoint that we've engaged with the city to work through to make sure that our street section include ample space for pedestrians to move. We've included a couple extra feet in the right-of-way for pedestrians to move, whether it's on foot or on their bike, but also internal to our own property. In many of the lots, specifically that center around this plaza space here, it's our intent to take those buildings and push them back about 5 feet off the property line too, to give an extra 5 feet for the pedestrian movement along any of these street sections. Now we're going to talk about grading, which is our first step into what I'll call the vertical world. Before we start taking a look at the overall building and programming, I think it's important to understand what's going out there from a grading standpoint. I mentioned a little bit about that at the top, but just to kind of give everybody a baseline understanding of what the perimeter looks like in terms of grade. The main entrance is at 68. 72nd Dodge, the intersection actually is at about 67. It's hard to perceive. The crest of the hill is about right here. So you're still going up, and then you're kind of coming down to 72nd and Dodge. We're at 71 up here in the northeast. We peak at 90 on Cass Street, and then we come back down to 50 on 74th Ave, all the way down, 75th Ave, down to 46, again on the southwest corner. So the way that works itself out internal to the development, I'll focus on kind of this middle block here of 3 different parcels here. And we'll start with Target sits at about 80 feet, and we're slowly going down the hill as we move west. So we're at about 75 here on what I call the I block. And then we cross the street and we step down about 5 feet into this plaza space in the middle of the development. And then we step down again on the western edge at 65, and then we fall about 15 feet to 75th Ave. So what we're doing is, if you remember that retaining wall that I was talking about that existed, somewhere in here that was between the existing or old Best Buy and Sears, that exists somewhere in here. we're basically navigating that by placing a 5% grade from this point westward. The intent is we've got a lot of on-street parking along 75th Ave on the west end. That parking is not necessarily primarily, we've been working with, and we'll bring this up a little bit further in the conversation too as well, but we've been working with Walker Parking in terms of understanding our parking inventory and where it's needed for each use type. That parking that's on the west end is not necessarily needed for the development other than for multifamily use only. So if you choose not to park underground and have a parking stall there, you're likely going to park on street, or your visitors will be on street on 75th Ave. I'm going to skip this slide and jump right into the 3D stuff because I think this has a little bit more impact for everyone to take a look at relative to overall vertical programming. So I'm going to kind of dance through in alphabetical order, starting with the letter A and starting counterclockwise. So A, we talked a little bit about, there's the existing Target and the existing Target parking lot. Those will remain the same. You may have seen some trailers sitting out here already along Dodge Street. Target is actually undergoing a renovation of the interior and a slight modification to the exterior as well today. As we move north to Block B, that is the existing parking structure. So that is a 6-level parking structure that serves about 2,200 stalls. That's about 50% of the overall parking need for the overall development is in one existing piece of infrastructure. So that sits on the northeast corner of the site. It's accessible from 3 different sides: the south, the west, and the north off of Cass Street. Moving west, Block C. Block C is an entertainment and family entertainment and fitness center. So we're looking at about 150,000 square feet there at 50,000 square feet of floor. So that's 3 floors, 3 stories tall. As we continue to move west, Block D is corporate office structure, 400,000 square feet gross that can be phased into 2 different structures. So those 2 masses you see here could represent different phases, or that could be built all in one phase as well. As we move west to Block F, this is again, if you recall a slide ago, I was talking a little bit about the grading. We're starting to fall now west. So we've got about 15 feet of grade from this intersection down, and we've got about 10 feet of grade from this intersection north to Cass. It really drives this property to be a natural location for an additional parking structure, because honestly we can bury that and camouflage that right into the property on the northwest corner there. So there's actually a 3-story parking garage here that's accessible from 3 different sides, very similar to what's happening with B. The top level is accessible right as you come in off of Cass, off of 74th Ave. The mid-level is accessible right off of Chicago, right here where my cursor is. And the lower level is accessible off of 75th Ave on the west side. So there's a parking structure in the middle of that block, and then it is wrapped with a senior housing component as well as a multifamily component. The idea is to bring as many of those units and uses to grade, to conceal that parking garage where we can, where grade allows us to do such. But then as soon as we get taller in terms of floor level than the parking garage, then we build on top of the parking garage and use the parking garage as a podium. Moving south to Block G. Block G, I like to explain it as a cake because there's several different uses here. We'll start at the bottom. There's 2 stories of parking at the base of this structure, both accessible from 2 different levels, one from the south and the lowest level on the west. That parks every multifamily tenant inside of this block. The first level, the pedestrian level of Block G, encompasses about 70,000 square feet of retail space. Accessible primarily from the east side here. As you can see, you're starting to see how that plaza space starts to connect itself east to west and becomes engaged by the pedestrians as they move through the development. And then we've got 4 stories of multifamily residential on top of that retail podium. As we move east into Block H is primarily single-story retail. There's about 70,000 square feet of retail in this block. 40,000 in this building, and roughly 15 and 15 in these two southernmost buildings. You know, again, what's interesting about a lot of the buildings here is there's really no backside to any of these buildings. Everything's kind of abutting a public street some way, shape, or form, which quite honestly, that's what the urban design code speaks to. So we're fully aware of and working with the city staff to make sure that, you know, there is going to be, you know, a dumpster enclosure or a service entrance in some of these buildings, but we're going to architecturally make sure that they're still relevant and there's transparency around these buildings as much as possible. So they're very pedestrian oriented and not service-oriented buildings. As we move east across to Block I is really a mixed-use block in and of itself, and it's another one of those cakes. So we're going to start at the bottom, below grade. We've got a parking structure that encompasses almost the entire block. We're utilizing the existing, on the north side of Target, there's actually a ramp that takes you down underneath the mall and services the mall today. We're going to utilize that ramp to get us down underneath the I block, and we can park underneath the I block. Then the first level of the I block all the way around encompasses, on the north end, there's a hotel. So there's going to be a hotel lobby on that base floor, but there's also around 62 to 65,000 square feet of retail underneath at the base level of the I block. So really, this entire plaza that stretches east to west, north to south, we haven't gotten to K yet, but what that's connecting is all of your pedestrian destinations for the overall property. So we've got retail here on the east side. There's a really large open plaza gathering space here as well. So you're seeing a 150-key hotel on the north side, as well as some condos on top of that structure as well. Also, the south side of the I block, there's another 4 stories that equate to about 120,000 square feet of office space on the I block as well. Moving over to J, I'll talk about J and K together. J is retail component, roughly around 18,000 square feet here, and about 35,000 square feet between these 4 buildings here, and these are meant to be more of our dining district at this point. So a walkable connection from the retail down south. There could still be some smaller retail within this area of the development as well. But the idea is that it's all walkable. You park and you can connect yourself or anywhere you need to go throughout the overall development. So in all, we're looking at about 1.7 million square feet of development. And one question that's asked a lot is where and how are we parking all these people? You know, it's our goal really to conceal as many of these parking stalls as possible. You know, starting with an existing parking structure that parks almost half of our total is a good place to start, quite honestly. So I'm going to walk you through what's happening in a little bit more detail below grade as well as kind of on grade in terms of surface parking stalls. I think an interesting benchmark at this point is to understand how many existing stalls there are today at Crossroads. I should say maybe a couple months ago. There were 4,063 parking stalls there today. Today, what we and Walker Parking have walked through, we're looking at around 4,800 parking stalls. 85% of those are covered and 15% of those are surface. So let's go through the covered parking stalls really quick. So again, we talked about 2,200 stalls in the northeast here. That inventory is inside of an existing parking garage. Then underneath the C and D block, we have the ability to park another 162 vehicles underneath the corporate office building. This parking garage in the northwest, it's 3 stories, has the capacity to hold up to 7,800 parking stalls if needed. We also have 2 levels of parking underneath the multifamily here. Those 2 stories equate to about 400 parking stalls. And then under the I block, we're parking around 200 to 230 stalls underneath that block. So there's 2 surface lots here, 180 stalls, excuse me, three surface lots, 180 stalls here, 56, and 190 here. That makes up the overall parking inventory for the development. I think with that, that kind of concludes the overall vision of Crossroads, and we're going to end it with this slide here, which starts to give you a little bit more of a pretty picture in terms of what's actually happening in terms of scale. I think what's most important here is the density that we're driving. Again, that 1.7 million square feet of development is pretty impressive. And we're doing so by going vertical as much as we can in many areas of the overall development. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jude Beller, who's going to talk a little bit about schedule and get into a few more of the project details and the nitty-gritty. So.
Thanks, Kurt. Jude Beller, Lockwood Development, 12910 Pierce Street. First, we want to commend Kurt and the HBA team. We've got a few edicts from our owners. Frank has always requested this become a legacy grade asset for the city of Omaha, and Chip has always required this to become inviting for everybody in the city of Omaha. And we think the master plan is developed very nicely and is accommodating that, so appreciate their work. Maybe just to start, and I'll try to be brief, real quick, I've heard that we've gone through this slideshow many, many times before, and there's a couple facts that I think are important for everybody to remember. So today, there's about 1 million square feet at the site before it was demoed, and we're bringing back 1.7 million square foot. What I hear when Kurt goes through that on the square footages for the buildings, about 14% of what we just described is retail and restaurants. About 10% is hotel, and about 10% is entertainment and fitness. So that's 34% of what we'll put in a play category. 30% of that program is office, and 36% of that is multifamily and senior family. So a third, pure work, play, and living quarters, all in one site. So we're proud of that and how that's come out. As you walk through these slides, a couple different touch points that I'd like to mention. The streets. That's about 1 million square feet, that's about a mile of linear feet that we've put in new streets here. That right-of-way represents about 10 acres. So that's 10 acres of this site, 40-acre site, 10 acres that we'll be dedicating to the public for a public asset. So 25% of our site we'll dedicate. We look at this slide, my takeaway is about 2.5 miles of new sidewalks, most of which will be 10-foot wide sidewalks. That also represents about 2.5 acres of plaza space in our site. So quite a bit of this square footage on the horizontal plane will be dedicated for public amenity or public gathering space or otherwise dedicated to the public. On the parking, I think a main takeaway we would like to mention, Kurt mentioned we're bringing in 4,800 new parking stalls, which today we have about 4,100. On the surface, today, 46% of those stalls are surface parking stalls of the 4,100. In the future, 15% will be surface parking stalls. If you do the math on that, that's about 9 acres of what was parking surface stalls have now been put into production for other uses, buildings, on-street parking, plaza spaces. 9 acres of that site that exists today. That's impactful. Schedule. Touch on that real quick. We anticipate getting through entitlements hopefully this year. Demo, as everybody knows, is ongoing, hopefully completing that by May of this year. We'll enter into grading phase as well as all the infrastructure, which will take about a year. So about Q2 of next year, we should be completed with that. We'll have a Dodge Street improvement, which we'll talk about. That will begin next year in 2022, and hopefully you get completed through that construction season in 22. Anticipate first building permits being pulled Q3 of 22, with first occupancies about 2 years later. So anywhere from the third to fourth quarter of 24 all the way into 25, you'll see occupancies. Our budget for all of this is $554 million. About 20% of that budget is used for site control, so assembling the site, preparing the site, bringing the infrastructure for the site, as well as the public amenities. So we do have a request in for TIF assistance. We are in a CRA, Community Redevelopment Area here. So we have made a request. Our application is $79.4 million. That request will be used for incremental taxes to help us pay back the acquisition costs, the site assemblage. We had a lot of tenants inside the property, as well as assembling all the site, as well as Dylan Sears, who had a long-term lease at the site, as well as to assist with some matters with Target. They've got a party wall that we need to separate and improve so they can coexist with us. Demo and abatement, as well as grading, as well as all of the wet and dry utilities and new paving, sidewalks, streetscape, landscape, hardscape. All traditional things that TIF goes to rebate. That's part of our request, $79.4 million. Today, it's about $13 million of base value. That's $300,000 of taxes. We'll continue to pay those taxes forever. Those don't go away. Those go to the taxing jurisdictions that exist today. In the future, pursuant to our plan, we'll create about a little over $9 million of new tax revenue for the taxing jurisdictions, which would hit in about 15 years for them. So we believe that's impactful. We commend Mr. James and Mr. Krejci on the risk that it takes to do a project of this scale, but we're also not naive that no one person or one company can do that alone. It takes assistance. It takes a village to create these kind of projects, and so we are looking for some assistance from the public as well. I'd like to invite maybe Bridget to come up and talk a little bit deeper about our TIF application, and then we'll open up for questions.
Afternoon, Bridget Hadley, City Planning. As you have heard the term, you'll hear continually, this is an iconic location. I will just say I've had the privilege of working with the development team and Mr. Krejci since the city reached. I was hoping to give them something pretty to look at while I talked.
I'm going to put the Zoom back up here.
So I remember having the opportunity, like I said, almost 11 years ago, reaching out to Mr. Krejci, and the city was letting him know, we are here and we want to see this site redeveloped. So as the mayor has already said, this has been a long time coming, and the city has indicated its commitment, not only that way, but also following through with designating the area as a community redevelopment area, and then following up with a Crossroads area redevelopment plan to indicate, yes, we do want to use our incentives. TIF is one, and I think Jude will come back up and maybe touch on the others, but EEA, the Enhanced Employment Area, and everything that the city could use to help this project is the city's commitment. This particular specific proposal before you would not occur, as you have heard, without the city's incentive. Because of how TIF works, there will be no loss of property tax revenues to the taxing jurisdictions. The base tax revenues continue to flow. As they are now, they continue to flow to the taxing jurisdictions. The new property tax revenue, which are only generated once there's substantial completion of the proposed project, those new tax revenues will help offset the project costs. These particular revenues, these property tax revenues, which are new to, as a result of the project, are allowed under the community development law to pay for eligible costs already incurred by the project owner and developer. So thus, this particular, or the project owner and developer, pay those to the county treasurer, as any property owner does. They pay the full property taxes that are levied, and then the city finance department rebates only the new property taxes to help offset the project costs, and these are eligible project costs. I just wanted to make sure I explain that is the actual process of how this works. So they rebate those to help offset the project costs, and those project costs are funded and paid for by financing. In this case, equity from the project owners and traditional financing, bank debt. So the TIF that comes in, that new property tax revenue, helps to offset those costs, those eligible costs, and those the TIF financing. So that's how all the TIF projects work, and that's how it's also working on this particular project. So it just indicates that there is significant risk in any development, any redevelopment, and this one is also in the same situation. And those risks are borne by the project owner and the developer. Also to mention, once the TIF term expires, those tax revenues that help to offset the TIF redevelopment project become available and then flow to the taxing jurisdiction. So in this case, we're talking base valuation of about $13 million. This project is talking about bringing in a new 420 almost million in valuation. And that's how we get to this 79.4 million in new tax revenue. So that's how it works. That's what will happen with this particular project. I would say one other thing that this particular redevelopment project brings: jobs, new business investment, improved infrastructure in and surrounding the site, as mentioned by Mr. Caesar, connectivity within the site, as he talked about putting in the street grid, also spillover activity, economic activity in the Crossroads District, which we've already seen and we will continue to see as this particular site redevelops. The TIF represents approximately 14% of the invested project dollars. The TIF project is in compliance with the master plan for the city, community development law, and the TIF program. The TIF committee has reviewed and approved it. The planning board has recommended its approval. And with that, I will turn it back over, I believe, to the project developer and ask for your approval.
Jude Beller, 12910 Pierce. I failed to mention, as part of our TIF application, we have also included and anticipate making an application for enhanced employment area. So that we do anticipate creating 3,200 jobs. So that is identified as well in our TIF application. I want to make note of that. We anticipate that's about a $65 million application that would go in. We have not done that yet, but want to make sure that that's on the record. That's also part of what we anticipate doing. And we are in conversations as well with the city on the parking garage. There's a large 2,200 stall car parking garage located at the site, and we've spoken with the city about whether or not that is worthy of being a public asset based off of transit needs in the future. That's an ongoing conversation which we've not resolved at this point. Thank you.
Mr. Beller, is there anyone else from the ownership group or the development team that wishes to speak before I open the public hearing?
I would conclude our side of it.
Thank you. We'll have the public hearing, and then we'll go to council members who will likely have questions, so please stick around.
Thank you.
I'll open the public hearing for proponents at this time. Those in favor of items 8 and 9. Are there any proponents wishing to be heard?
Sindana Teft, 7447 Farnham Street, Omaha 68114. First of all, I want to say I got here by Orbit today, and guess where I caught Orbit? 72nd and Dodge. I'm going to feel like a cheerleader, sorry. I am a proponent for this, for the Crossroads Development Project. I come wearing many hats. I have a small business 2 blocks and live 2 blocks south of Dodge off of 74th. I have adopted 72nd and Dodge as an adopt-a spot for Keep Omaha Beautiful, picking up litter. I'm also a Business Watch coordinator for the south side of 72nd and Dodge. And then I'm also a member of Mode Shift and the Walkability Committee, and we've just completed a sidewalk assessment of Dodge Street. So I have a lot of different hats, but I'm coming here, I think, as a neighborhood person and as a small business person. First of all, I want to thank the developers and architects and project managers who have held extra meetings and listened to and engaged in conversation to some of us who've had some questions. There were several areas within the project we had some concerns with, and we appreciated the willingness of Lockwood Development Group to adopt most of those improvements And they were also very open with us about the ones that they felt that they absolutely could not acquiesce to. This development will become a true crossroads, north, south, east, and west. A true crossroads also for transportation options, biking, walking, transit, and motor vehicle. It also appears to be a great crossroads for mixed-use development, office space, retail, entertainment, housing, and for older people too. While this development did not apply for the TOD overlay, they have looked at and incorporated some of the design aspects along with the complete street design model. Lockwood Development is now aware of exactly how systems and connectivity in the area work. They did not know that some of us who ride bicycles had cut through the Crossroads area once the fences went up. Oh my gosh, what were we supposed to do? Ride on the sidewalk? Couldn't do 72nd Street. And I know Mr. Festerson has probably cut through this area many times too on his bike. So this area has a lot of potential for trail use to Exarban, to UNO, and then there are many bicycle and pedestrian and transit generators here. There's going to be a B-cycle station next to the Orbit station right there outside on on Dodge Street. It's highly walkable to restaurants and commercial space, due space, plus other housing units in the areas to the east and west. It's exciting to see the connectivity this project will have with all the entrances they have. There's many of them. The Dodge Street widening, which I have not heard talked about here, may not need to happen. I have not seen other developments that have 2 lanes turning in, but having a really nice visual entrance will be really nice. There's going to be pedestrian walkways through the H block and other gathering places, and I really like the grid design as far as the forward thinking with the city streets possibly connecting in the future. I walk this area a lot. It's my neighborhood. The developers must also help advocate for safe crossings, and the City of Omaha must step up. For instance, people who live within the development and want to take Orbit East will need to cross both 72nd Street and Dodge Street. As of right now, there are no crosswalks at 72nd and Dodge Street, and it's an incredibly busy intersection. So I'm anticipating that by being a proponent for this project, that both the developers and the City of Omaha will step up and really advocate for safe crossings for pedestrians. The advantage, whoops, I'm going to skip that part. The crossing at 72nd in Chicago is also really important, especially for the people at Swivel. I actually walked that area the other day, and I could just imagine what it's going to look like with Chicago Street going through and then having a pedestrian overpass over it. It actually was just kind of exciting to envision what that's going to look like. Anyway, so there's a definite problem with that 72nd and Chicago intersection. So wrapping this up, I really want to just say that we all want this development to be successful, and I know that we've heard that Mr. Krejci wants it to be his legacy, and Omaha also demands or hopes to have a return in their investment, particularly with the TIF funds approved. I'm not going to talk about the TIF funds because that's a foreign language to me, but I'm just really super excited to see this project move forward.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? You'll give your name and address, and then your time will begin.
Marty Hosking, Keller Williams, Greater Omaha. And I do live in that area, 7510 Cass Street. I'm a proponent of this project. I remember the early newscast where there was an interview with the developers, and the question was put to them as to, what are you going to do? I mean, look at all the protests going on here on the corner and all this craziness going on. What's it going to be like to have development here? And I really, really liked their response. And I think it's emblematic of where we're going in the future and where we need to go as a city. He said, and I don't remember which developer said it, but kudos to whomever did it. Might have been Chip himself, but he said, this is what we want. We want people, this is a community space. So people are going to come here to protest. They're going to come here to celebrate. They're going to come here to mourn. It's a community place. And I'm really, really super excited about that. And I think this is why we ought to give it really, really strong consideration, even though I know that the arguments around TIF are worthy of consideration. I think there are worthy considerations around and concerns around the use of TIF money, at least the historical use of it. I think that we should still move ahead on this because of the implications for a much larger picture for the entire city. This isn't just a neighborhood thing, and actually it's not just a 2022, 23, 24 thing, it's a 2039 thing. And that's where we see that economies of scale, pedestrian access, less dependence on the car, more interconnected community living, four corners development. We're really realizing that purely suburban emphasis on growth since 1945 has not been good for us. And this is really astounding that this is actually turning that around. It's actually historically very important that there's willingness to reverse some of that and to begin to build up the center of the city. The designation of something being blighted, to me, is not a static thing either. It's an organic thing. It's not static. To be blighted is something that will continue to happen in that area if there's not an emphasis put on bringing it back. And so I think we should be considering not so much that, well, maybe that's not a good use of the word blight right now, but I think we should see where things are going as a consideration for the project. And I want to say ditto to the previous woman who spoke up here. I'm 100% in agreement. I'm on the north side of it, so I would speak for the north side of the development and just say that my major concern is that I know the city has some sort of an idea of putting in some boulevarding along Cass Street. My main concern is that the city take advantage of the opportunity on Cass to improve that street, to slow it down, make it safer, and make it more neighborhood-y, because it's not a direct link to the west. Dodge Street is. It's an accessory. So let's slow that down. Let's let that be more beautified and connect and allow this project then in that way to connect better to the neighborhood. So I'd like to advocate for, and I want to thank the developers for including me in the conversation too. We talked a lot about that, and I am strongly in favor of the boulevarding effect there and would love to continue the conversation about what we can do with that. All right, thank you very much.
Are there any other proponents?
Lee Myers, 105 South 9th Street, number 603, here for myself and Mode Shift. I'm on the board of Mode Shift. And I'm not here asking for more or less TIF, but rather asking what the public benefits of TIF here will do. Our city needs a heart transplant. Not a transplant of a decrepit old model, but a new forward-looking heart capable of pumping for 30 years. You are the surgeons. What sort of heart will you give us? The main focus of TIF ought to be to drive once and find many places to walk. And we've heard that, and the TIF needs to be pointed to that. Some developers have locked on the old design of 12-foot driving lanes, go as fast as you can. Why would there be 12-foot and half-foot driving lanes inside Crossroads? Where are you speeding to that you have to get like that? The best examples of walkability in Omaha ought to be models. Exarban Village is kind of half old and half new. It's trying to learn. Old Market was park once, walk and be surprised. Lawrence and Gardens, park once and smell and walk around. Durham Museum, park once and walk through history. And Jocelyn, park once and walk through your emotions. Crossroads needs to be a park once and walk and be surprised. The funds need to be these public benefits, not just tearing down old buildings. You're going to debate about how much, but really also consider what are you doing and what are you specifying with these TIF funds. How about buying the existing parking garage, and how about buying more frontage along Dodge Street to put the sidewalks back, give everybody more space. Seems like that would be a good use of TIF. Buy the parking garage and reduce TIF by that much. Use the parking. The city of Omaha has a parking department that has really improved things. How about integrating them into this parking situation and the street? Because they've learned a lot about how parking garages and city streets work together. If they don't get in there and manage that, it's not integrating in the rest of the city. Use TIF to do crosswalks. Those Public Works doesn't like crosswalks, but this development needs to have crosswalks marked, delineated, maybe raised, but lots of things to be done on crosswalks, and TIF can be used for that. Also, if TIF can be used to facilitate the biking and walking tracks, also they can be designed to go east to Elmwood Park, Memorial Park, and go west to the Little Papio and Trail. So how can that be, use TIF to design that? TIF can be built inside the crossroads.
Thank you. Your time's expired. We're still on proponents, folks, so we're going to reclassify that one. I don't know if you heard the announcement. Did you want to speak in favor? Okay. Are there any other proponents? Okay. We'll call for opponents now, those opposed to item 8 and or 9.
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I'm against TIF in general for 3 or 4 different reasons, and I'd like to finish today. The first reason is on Sunday there was a really wonderful article about TIF for the Crossroads. Very well written, but it misses a key important point here. It doesn't define for the citizens that are being asked to pay for this through property taxes, whose property taxes are paid for. They don't understand TIF, maybe because it's not really explained very well by you guys or by the press, particularly the World Herald. Now, I remember when ConAgra came in here and we blew up some pretty beautiful buildings that could have housed a lot of people and that already had docks and stuff. They got a lot of benefit, but they left town. Now, these developers, are all of these developers in Omaha going to stay in Omaha for 20 years? We're trying to get this to go 20 years now, folks, but 15 years now. What is their property tax in this? Is it their property tax that's going to pay for it, or is it mine? The city's participation, what does that mean? How does the city participate in the funding of this? Is there a connection to a land bank? Who gives out the loan for the developer to do this that's paid off over 20 years or more, and hopefully completely paid off with the higher property tax values? But those won't be higher for 15 years, and now 20, maybe 25, maybe never. What if these developers walk off? Oh my gosh, I drove by the Crossroads and you know what? We haven't voted on it, but the buildings are all gone. You've already done it. Just like with the Shark Club up on the hill, 72nd and Center. Before we vote on it, you guys have it torn down, it's already gone. It's cut and dried. Right here in River City. 76 trombones, a little salesmanship. And the old medicine wagon with the bitters. They don't really tell you how bitter it is. They just say it'll cure your ills. Build it and they will come. And we've got the big buses for it. What if they don't come? Somebody going to tear it down at our expense? And then we pay for it twice? I don't want to pay for it, so I vote against it. Thank you.
Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard that are in the chamber? Seeing none, we'll move to those who have registered to speak via Zoom. And we'll begin with Alex O'Hanlon. Oh, well, Ms. O'Hanlon can always submit her remarks in writing. We'll next proceed to Sarah Johnson. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized for 3 minutes after you begin with your name and address.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Johnson, 2316 North 52nd Street. I didn't prepare an exact 3-minute speech like I sometimes do because I feel like it's hard to feel like we're making a difference these days. Pete, I'm bummed that you didn't return my phone call. I wanted to talk to you about a few things. This was one of them, so I guess now we get to have this conversation. I guess I should also start with saying thank you to Lockwood. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. These are my opinions as Sarah Johnson today, but I also have worked with MoShift Omaha for the last decade. And we reached out to Lockwood. We gave them the same request that we gave the city council, a nice 8 or 9 point recommendation list. And they humored us and had an hour-long conversation with us. So I do want to make sure that I'm on the record saying thanks to Lockwood for making it feel like you cared about our opinions and took some of them into consideration. I didn't hear you bring up bike parking this time, but you did assure us that there will be plenty of bike parking. And, again, a lot of other points that we made. So thank you for that. I guess the point I'm trying to make today is not that TIF is bad. I think TIF is an important tool and it can be used in a manner that truly benefits the majority of the community. I think that anytime we're not talking about affordable housing right now, we're not dealing with reality. Like, we're in the middle of a crisis. We know that there's an 80,000 unit shortage right now. That's crisis level. We know that. So I think that the main point today is not that, this is on the developer. This is on the city. Of course the developer wants to make money. Of course they're going to apply for TIF. Of course they're going to do whatever they can to get as many incentives as they can. The developer wants to make money. They want to be profitable. I understand that. I think your goal as a city council should be to vet these projects and make sure that they're truly benefiting the city at large, not in 15 years when the tax finally catches up to us, but like right now. We need to be proactive in looking at the community's needs right now. And I don't think that this is a bad project. I do appreciate that they've taken into consideration mixed use. That's great. The people that are going to be working at this development aren't even going to be able to live in the apartments that are next door. That seems problematic. It seems like a missed opportunity. I also just wanted to say, of course, Stothert thinks it's worth it because Lockwood and its partners have given her $64,000 over the last decade. Of course she thinks it's worth it. Festerson, you've gotten about 10 grand from these guys. Melton, 3,500, Harding, 3,000, Jerem, 2,500. It's worth it to you. It's not worth it to a lot of people. I hear so much frustration from the community right now, and I don't think that you're really listening to anything but the dollar signs. And I think that at a point we have to get real about what's actually serving our community, and best doesn't always need to mean profitable. That's all. Thank you.
Seeing no further opponents, the public hearing is closed. The developers have 2 minutes for rebuttal if you wish to say anything.
Drew Beller, Lockwood Development, 12910 Pierce. Couple different comments made, and just want to give a couple remarks to them. First, there was a comment, and I failed to mention, there is a Dodge Street expansion part of this where we're adding a dual turn lane. That moves the traffic into the 74th entrance a little quicker, not sitting at the light and causing traffic frustrations. So the level of service there warrants that we add an additional lane to get into the development from traffic moving eastbound on Dodge Street into the development. There was a comment about the boulevard inside of Cass Street. We've had a remark and a comment that we've been juggling. Cass Street it's been requested to include a median from 72nd to 76th Street. While not a boulevard, we've all analyzed whether or not a median makes sense along Cass Street, and that's included in our project, and we will be complying with that request. There was a comment about 12.5-foot lanes inside the development and the speed of traffic and autos. We are sensitive to the pedestrian nature in this development. At one point in time, we actually had 3 lanes inside of our development. In conversations with Public Works and Planning, we've been debating these things for the last 4 months. We've conceded that we took away one of the lanes inside of the development and made it 2 lanes. We thought originally that 15-foot lanes made the most sense. But in talking that through with Complete Streets, we conceded that as well back to 12.5-foot lanes as opposed to the 11 with the remark. Crosswalks at mid-block. We do have crosswalks would be highly visible and special pavers put in place to make sure it's very clear that's a pedestrian crosswalk. Purposeful for pedestrian safety as we make those movements across the streets internal to the development. There was a remark about sidewalks and bicycle traffic and the importance of it, and we concur with that, so much so that we're required to put a 7-foot sidewalk along Dodge Street. We're actually going to make that a 10-foot wide sidewalk. We're going to take it off of the curb to bring the pedestrian back further. There's a little bit of a pinch point around the Target lot, which we don't own, where it's actually going to be 7 feet, but the full stretch from 72nd all the way to 75th along our frontage in front of Dodge Street will be a 10-foot sidewalk. And then lastly, I'll hurry, whose property taxes are paying this? Just so we're very clear, our redevelopment area just includes what we showed on our picture. So it'll just be the taxes that are driven off of our development that'll help rebate the TIF request that we've made. Nobody else's taxes outside of our district will pay that. Who pays the loan? Technically, we incur the cost for all the public improvements. And what we get back, I think everybody knows, but just to say it on the record, what we get back is a promise that if there's taxes ever collected in the future that come off the increment of our development, those taxes and only those taxes would be what help pay back our loan for all of the public improvements we put. So no one else is on the hook. The city doesn't cut us a check. We get a piece of paper today that says if we actually create incremental taxes here, we can get those rebated. And that's the way all TIFs are working. So there's no cash actually coming from the city on this transaction. That concludes my
Thanks, Mr. Beller. And just for the record, I think Mr. Boozer would have kept it under the 2 minutes. Mr. Festerson, it's your district, District 1, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. And I appreciated the photo from 1960, the first slide we saw of Crossroads in its heyday there. Having grown up in the neighborhood, that's how I remember it too. I will say 1960 pre-dedicated me, but I do recall it being busy and thriving, and that's what we need to get back to, and that's why we're all here, because it hasn't been that way in literally decades. And it is the heart of our city and the emotional heart of our city, as described by some of the proponents here today. And it's so important that we maintain that. And I think we would all agree of the importance of inner city redevelopments and infill projects like this. In fact, this has been a long and frustrating process, as we all know, to get to this point. And I was really concerned a few years ago we had missed that window of opportunity because we had major redevelopments, or I shouldn't say redevelopments, major developments happening much further west than 72nd and Dodge. So I feel like we're fortunate to get back to this conversation here today and to have what would be a $550 million investment in our city with over 3,000 jobs, spurring additional surrounding development, which is happening already across the street on 72nd Street and just to the northwest on 78th Street, that wouldn't be happening in a mixed-use fashion but for this being on the table. Ms. Hadley, I might ask a few follow-up questions of you if you can come down to the podium, please. Having said all these things, I think it's very important we get it right. And so I want to walk through a number of things, both with you and also with the developer, and as it impacts the surrounding neighborhoods in my district. And I would say the vast majority of my constituents want to see this happen in a big way and all at the same time, not in a phased way. I think that's been the problem over the last couple of decades. We've seen a spurious reinvestment in the property that hasn't gone well, and that's where we are today. So I think the complete redevelopment of the area is justified and desirable. Obviously, from a TIF committee's perspective, which you manage, we're in a but-for situation here. This would not be occurring but for the participation of TIF. Is that accurate to say?
Correct, yes, you're absolutely right.
And I'll ask that of the developer too, but I'm just sure the answer is also yes. Correct. Which is why this hasn't happened in decades until now, and wouldn't happen without it. Ms. Halley, I thought you did a nice job talking about the base tax receipts, what they are today, and how that doesn't change. All taxing jurisdictions will continue to receive that money should this move forward. But what does happen is after the loans are paid off, these taxing jurisdictions will get an additional $9 million per year in perpetuity, which would not happen but for this project occurring. And I think that's why I received a positive email from the superintendent of District 66. They'll be the biggest benefactor of that tax revenue coming in, because they are the school district in this area and in my district at this location. TIF eligible expenses, so they all go into public infrastructure, as was noted, and that's what I want to talk about next. So the streets, the sidewalks, the utilities, the landscaping, curbs, site acquisition, all things that are very important to making something like this successful, and frankly, that the surrounding neighborhoods deserve. These might be questions for Mr. Beller, if he can come up. Just your name and address again for the record.
Jude Beller, Lockwood Development, 12910 Pierce Street.
So I want to walk through with you some of the things that I think you covered for the most part in your presentation, but I think are important in emphasizing. And I do appreciate the participation of Mode Shift in this conversation. They engaged us early on. I forwarded their observations to you and requested you engage them in these conversations and have meaningful dialogue around what can be included and changed in the original proposal to better accommodate important things like pedestrian access, bike access, trail access, and all the things I'm going to walk through here in a minute. And I think you did that, and you've accomplished a lot of things that they observed, and I think has been a good part of this process. One of the first things is the orbit station that was noted earlier in Ms. Teff's testimony. That is brand new right there, and we are trying to accommodate walking access from that public transit station, which is important for folks taking public transit, hopefully, to this development and enjoying its benefits. It's not actually ideal right there with the target property. If I had my way, I'd have a build-to setback line right on the 72nd Street, rather than the parking lot that exists there. But that is the current state of play, and you don't control that property, so that's out of your control. But I think what you have done, as you showed in the diagrams there, is allow pedestrian access through the plaza and into your site. I think you're going to pull up the drawing again. That might be helpful.
Yeah, the deputy clerk will get that back up there. And she'll minimize her name, so. There we go. I'll scroll through. Thank you.
You wouldn't mind advancing a couple slides there. And so I think how you've accommodated that is through that pedestrian walkway and also the sidewalks. You want to expand upon that a little bit more?
Sure. So just so everyone is clear, Target and its parking lot are owned by Target Corporation, so we don't control them. So their property line comes darn close to, we have a little bit of land that we control right in front of them that's being dedicated as we expand that. So when I mentioned the 10 feet sidewalk that we're putting in, that's going to gobble up all that land to the west of Orbit and transverse all the way to the 75th Street. And there's a little pinch point right here where we only get about 7 feet of sidewalk. One of the dynamics we have with our Dodge Street Improvement Project for the dual turn lane will cause a good portion of this north lane of Dodge Street to be re-improved. That will start right after the Orbit station, so we will not affect that. In conversations
Mr.
with...
Beller, may I interrupt you? Would you
Please.
just explain what you mean by that dual turn lane?
Sure.
I don't follow you there.
I apologize. So on Dodge Street here, eastbound traffic on Dodge getting into the development, at 74th, our main entrance, currently there exists a single turn lane. So as traffic wants to get in here, because of that light, it can back up with too many folks wanting to get in here. Now, it hasn't been in the last few years, but back in the day, that lane is not deep enough. And so one of the improvements that will have to be made here will in fact causing 2 turn lanes for eastbound traffic going north into the development. So that would also then cause us to dedicate some more land in our property to allow for Dodge to improve. And that's a coordination effort both with Omaha's Public Works as well as the state of Nebraska, as is the state highway.
Thank you. Another request was making sure we have bike parking at the front entrances of retail right in that same area, which you are committing to do, correct?
Correct, we have.
We've also talked about the long-term biking parking for office and apartments further to the north. You're also accommodating for that.
That is correct. In conversations with Mode Shift, we had mentioned to them, they had made a request for bike parking, and so we will have some both in the actual garage here as well as inside of the garages for the apartments, and then again in the retail corridors, so it's convenient as well. We'll have it.
And then I think the street network you described there, I think that might have been actually the biggest alteration and biggest improvement from these conversations. From your originally planned 3 lanes down to 2 lanes of all the internal streets that will better accommodate, I think, road sharing between vehicles and bikes, and that is the objective.
Yeah, so I think Cindy said it very fairly, one of the folks that gave testimony for proponents. We tried to listen, and we may have learned a little too, as we debated whether we follow a model that is in place today at Exarban Village, which has 3 lanes, which allows a lot of deliveries in the middle lane to occur and what truck traffic is, but it also causes a little bit more of a breadth in terms of width of the lanes. As we analyzed this and went back and forth, and in conversations with planning and public works, we conceded that and actually shifted it back down to 2 lanes and said, maybe we thought too hard about that in terms of the truck deliveries, and could bring that back to 2 lanes, and we did that.
I think that's a positive improvement as well. We talked about safe connectivity to the Keystone Trail just to the west, which is a major trail in our city, and when we complete the connection to Cunningham Trail, will be the longest trail from north to south in our city. So having connections to that amenity would be very beneficial for this area. I believe you're providing that as well through your sidewalk connections and future possible street connections to the west there, even though you don't obviously control all that property in between. Is that accurate to say?
That is absolutely fair. We agree with that point. I mean, quite frankly, we'd love to have a 10-foot connection all the way to the Keystone Trail. And that's also part of why we conceded if we start and put it in ourselves, then maybe it follows as other people develop to the west.
And talk about B-Cycle a little bit. I've been a proponent of what they're doing for our city as well, and you do intend to locate a station here, right?
Yeah, so we spoke to the B-Cycle folks in coordination with Mode Shift, and they have a station, I believe, coming into orbit at 72nd on the north side. And there's actually 2 aspects. One was a request perhaps for us to include fix-it stations for bicycles, both maybe at this orbit station as well as another location, and we've agreed to do that. And then we're also entertaining a conversation with leadership at B-Cycle for perhaps another location. We want to go a little deeper in terms of how they see it siting itself and where it makes the most sense, but we have talked about locating a second spot here.
I think that'd be a positive as well. Last couple of things for you, but they're important ones. The sidewalks you talked about, 2.5 miles of new sidewalk, mostly 10 feet wide. That's wider than most of our trails right now. Can you talk a little bit about that and where that will all appear on the site?
Sure. So what is required of us around the perimeter boundary of the site is a 7-foot sidewalk. So we've actually conceded that we would make these along Dodge Street 10 feet, and I believe we're actually making Cass Street 10 feet as well. And there's an exception right around the parking garage. We would keep these, so all new sidewalks, but we would keep these at 7 foot wide. And the reason for doing that is not that we don't want 10 feet, it's that there's some mature trees there. And we thought about not taking those down. If it became important to take those down for the 10 foot, we could talk about that, but we thought that it wouldn't make sense to do that. So that's around the perimeter. Internal to the district on our right-of-way, in working with the planning department, we have developed a street section that, again, we talked about the lane widths, 12.5-foot lane to the curb, and then behind that is 5 foot of sidewalk, 10 foot of planters or green space, and then another 5 foot of sidewalk before we get to a property line. So we've got 20 feet, pretty generous, after the street that we've dedicated to the public and the pedestrian.
Which includes the 7-foot setbacks that are landscaped and green, and I think that's
we'll have 10 feet inside of the right-of-way, and then after that, we'll also have plazas beyond.
And especially along Dodge Street right there, right?
Along Dodge Street, that's correct. We'll actually we'll bring the sidewalk off of the curb on Dodge Street, and so then we'll have 8 feet of green space between the curb and the sidewalk, and then we'll have our 10-foot sidewalk, and then some more feet up to the property lines.
Yeah, I think that's very important, and I know there's a bigger discussion that needs to get had about walkability on Dodge Street itself, but I think in the space you're controlling right here, that'd be a great improvement and starts to get to that goal. And then the crosswalks and...
Sorry, real quick, just a small point, but on that, you know, when we get this heavy snows as we have, again, it only happens a few times a year, but it's important, and I know it's interesting to the folks and our neighbors that we talked about, or excuse me, I've talked to, the plowing along that sidewalk along Dodge, you know, we're trying to time when the street plows push the snow into that 8 foot of green space, and so we think with a bigger sidewalk, it actually makes it a little easier to kind of keep that more regularly plowed during these heavy snows, notwithstanding the fact that we can't perfectly time when the trucks will come by and push the snow back in.
Yep. And then talk about the crosswalks a little bit. I know you've committed to prominent crosswalk marking and raised crosswalks in some cases on the internal portion of this site, right?
Well, so we have committed to, so at these mid-block connections that connect our plaza down our central corridor as well as to this retail and dining district here, we've got a couple different mid-block connections as well as connecting some of the office and senior family into the site as well. All of those will be heavily marked and designed to make it very clear that is a pedestrian crossing with different pavers, different styles, not just concrete. It won't be painted concrete or stamped. It will actually be a different material so everybody's very clear when you're walking in that pedestrian zone. We have analyzed whether or not a raised median makes sense, excuse me, a raised platform makes sense. It's a little challenging in all fairness when we come to the snow plows. We'll have to maintain those if we were to do that. So to this point, we've not committed to actually do raised. We have analyzed it, but right now we have committed to making those an amenity that is noticeable as the auto approaches that connection point.
Yeah, I think that's very important to pedestrians and safety and to the interior of the site as well. Thank you for all that, and thank you for engaging on those issues. I'll have a conversation with Public Works here in a minute, but I also want, while you're at the podium, we'll say, also in our initial conversations, I gave you a long list of people and neighborhood associations that I expected you to reach out to and engage before coming here today. And I do want to commend you in saying I think you did that. You worked hard at doing that. You've talked to all of them, especially the Penny Park Neighborhood Association just to the north, that arguably is most impacted by the development here. And so I appreciate you doing that, and want to talk to Public Works next about that proposition. Thank you. Mr. Fitzer, if you wouldn't mind coming down.
City Engineer Todd Fitzer, welcome.
So I know those conversations all included Dundee, Elmwood, Penny Park, and Fair Acres. I would say all of those surrounding neighborhoods have some concern about traffic and traffic flow in the area, and especially as applies maybe to 72nd and Cass, including a constituent I talked to just in the last few days that Mr. Fitzer and I were discussing this morning. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what the recommendation requires on Cass Street. And it's a recommendation from Public Works that there would be a median installed from 72nd to 76th Street. Can you just kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, Todd Fitzer, Public Works. We have requested that median be installed. If you look at all those streets to the north and the location or the distance between them, as well as some driveways for private homes, that clearly does not meet the current master plan. And that master plan was developed because of issues like this. As traffic got heavier, as the city developed, as we indicated, we had a picture here from 1960. Obviously, traffic's incredibly heavier than it was in 1960. We're getting crashes. We have a need for additional stacking lengths at some of the dual turn lanes. Example at 72nd Street from Cass. We have crash patterns there. So we have proposed a median. And what that does is it takes away the conflict points. If you look at the conflict points for full movement access intersections versus the conflict points with a median installed and right in, right out, it reduces those conflict points and increases the safety here for everybody involved, really. And that was why we made that recommendation.
And the end result would be you'd be able to go left and you'd be able to go north at the intersections of 76th, 75th, 74th, and 72nd, right? know if you have that map with you or not.
Well, I have the map here with me. The way they're labeled, 74th, there'd be a full movement with this signal, and the median would extend down to approximately where the driveway is at the gas station there at 76th. So you'd have a break at 74th. 72nd obviously stays the same. 76th stays the same. You mentioned also, and 75th. Yeah, you are correct.
Okay.
Just walking through those out loud here. I don't have the concept in front of me. I just have the aerial.
Thank you. And obviously, if this was approved, that might take, a couple of years to actually be installed.
Correct.
As the, project comes to light and is constructed itself. In the meantime, there was a concern with the turning lanes right at 72nd Cass. We discussed maybe a temporary solution this morning. Can you just walk through that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, what we discussed this morning was at 72nd Avenue there. So if you're eastbound on 72nd, eastbound on Cass, and you want to turn north on 72nd Avenue, there's two left turn lanes side by side there, one for eastbound, one for westbound. And it appears from the data we've seen and the complaint that we got from the citizen that there may be some confusion there. So in the interim, what we would propose is some what we call flexible barriers or delineator barriers that we would glue to the street that would make it very visible to that traffic where you're supposed to be channelized, because it appears that that's confusion by the driver that are eastbound that are trying to get into that dual left turn lane at 72nd. We can do that as soon as the weather warms up enough that we can adequately clean the street and glue those things down.
I think that'd be well received too. And almost every constituent I've talked to in that neighborhood where my grandparents lived for decades feels this concept is positive and could be helpful to traffic flow and to traffic safety right there. I do want to ask the developer about a traffic study here in a minute, but before you leave, Mr. Fitzer, a question for you too about the city's role in crosswalks, which I think are important external to this site. 72nd and Dodge, perhaps 72nd and Cass, 72nd and Chicago, where we know and hope there'll be pedestrians crossing. We have been successful in painting that before, but if you went there right now, it's very difficult to see. A commitment by you to help with that as this proceeds and do that repainting and properly mark those areas where appropriate?
We repaint all of our crosswalks twice a year in the busy areas. We have an abrasive environment with the material we put down on the streets during snow removal operations and things like that. So it's very difficult to keep the paint bright and shiny. So we do it a couple times a year. Same with the delineators. As soon as it warms up, we'll have our trucks out. We'll be restriping and repainting the city. Yeah, and those efforts are done by Public Works.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then, Mr. Beller, I'm not sure from the development team who might want to discuss the traffic study or initial findings around that.
I don't know either, but depending on the question, I can pull up a few different experts.
So I know that that's part of the, obviously, development proposition here too, and will be required in terms of, making sure we've analyzed what would be an increase in pedestrian and vehicle traffic in the area. So I'm curious about what that has shown, even if it's tentative findings at this point, about traffic flows exiting the site, presumably onto Cass Street or any other direction, and how that is anticipated to flow and what those increases might be.
Sure. Well, in that case, let me bring up maybe one of the authors of the traffic study draft and talk through it.
Terry Atkins, Lamprey Nearson, 14710 West Dodge Road. Councilman Festerman, we have submitted a draft traffic study to the city of Omaha. It is draft at this point, so I don't want to go too far into it until the city's provided us some comments. But we have looked at stacking distances for turning movements. We've looked at signal timing. I think externally, we don't have a lot of opportunities for improvements other than the dual left turn lane that was talked about. Probably the biggest opportunity that we'll work with Public Works on is traffic signal timing externally. That being said, internally, we are looking at stacking distances on left turn lanes as you're entering and exiting the sites. We're also looking at driveway locations to make sure we're not providing conflicts for people trying to come in and backing traffic out onto the streets. So we have looked at all the, at 72nd Street, at Cass Street, at 74th, and also at Dodge Street on 74th. And we've looked at the number of turn lanes and the stacking depths and, again, the driveway entrances. A little bit into the traffic control at the intersection, and mainly at 74th Street as it comes into our site, as to, again, not back traffic up externally.
And tentative findings show adequate thresholds, adequate infrastructure around those issues?
That's correct. I mean, that's part of the discussions we've had with Planning and Public Works is in talking about lane configurations, especially the configuration of the entrance at 74th and Dodge. That is going to be quite a large intersection just because of the number of lanes we do need in there to accommodate traffic.
And if there are some office functions to the north, which there are, and I would anticipate, some flows being most at, rush hour in the morning and in the afternoons. And that's somewhat the theory with the median we discussed, right? That when exiting at those time frames, those cars most likely go left to go west, or they go right to get onto 72nd Street and disperse in that fashion, right?
That's correct. And probably primarily the office users are going to go left off of 74th onto Cass Street. That is a signalized intersection. And so we have accommodated that movement, again, looking at it as office.
Okay. Thank you. I realize that those are tentative findings, and I'm sure we can get more into those details, as we get further in the process here, realizing that today is just preliminary plat, and that final plat and ACI overlay, which I think is also important to make sure we're following Omaha by design principles, will occur later in this process and have its own public hearing, which sounds like probably late summer. The last thing I would say, and I know there's other lights on, so I'll conclude my remarks, is that I think we're all interested in affordable housing. I think that is a top priority for our city going forward. There is a lot of housing on this project, as was mentioned, multifamily and senior housing, which I think are in very high demand. I think they'll be affordable to the market, but is that affordable housing? Not by my definition. And if one follows the HUD definitions of 80% of average median income, that's really what we need to be addressing going forward. If I had my druthers, that would be included in this project too. That's not what's being proposed. But I will say this, as we speak, the city is supporting legislation in Lincoln today that would allow incentives or requirements for redevelopment projects in the future to have these kind of expectations for affordable housing. And we think the city actually has that ability right now. And the planning committee is working on that right as we speak as well. We have the law department coming back to us in coming weeks to talk about how that might best be done. But it's clear that needs to be done way up front, probably in the TIF committee process, before it even goes to planning board, before it comes to city council. At this point, that's not something that can be addressed. So we need to get it up front, and there is a huge demand for it. But I also want to put this in perspective that there is an 80,000 unit shortage, we think, as has been estimated by a recent study. But should there have been incentives or requirements in city policy in the last year that might have produced 200, 300 units, and only in certain parts of town? So although I think it's an important piece of the puzzle, it's by no means the solution to our affordable housing interests. That's going to require a much, much bigger strategy that I think we're all interested in working on. With that, I'll yield the floor, but I will say I'm supportive of this project. My constituents and my neighbors have waited a long time to see this happen. It's a huge redevelopment in our city and will be a positive addition and positive reinvestment in the heart of our city and one of the most commercially valuable corners in my district and for our city as a whole. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Council Member Festerson. Council Member Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. If you grew up in Omaha, or if you have a history in Omaha, you probably have a story about Crossroads. And I think this project will ensure that future generations will have that same opportunity. One of the stories I have, I won't relate today because it's long, and more importantly, if I told it, my younger brother would probably be very disappointed in me. So the vision that Frank Krejci has for this landmark site and Omaha's future that he had at the ripe age of 86 years young is becoming a reality some 10 years later. And now partnering with Chip James and Jude Beller and the Lockwood team, I have the confidence, and I think all of Omaha should have the confidence that this project will be a success. So one of the intended side effects of TIF is that it will spur other development and investment in the surrounding areas, or what's been called spillover activity, as you heard earlier. And understanding that the city and the developer have been working on this project and to where we are today, it's already had that effect. You look to the east and you see Swivel Apartments by J Development, and you also see the ongoing conversations to the properties on the west as well as on the south. I think it will be additive also to the success of Orbit. This project is absolutely master plan compliant. It encourages additional private investment and infill development. It eliminates conditions detrimental to public health and safety and the welfare by developing vacant or underutilized properties within the neighborhoods, and it improves our infrastructure and the public improvements. So the nuts and bolts of it, I think, has been talked about, but I will go over that once again because I think it's important to note that, first of all, we usually kind of make light of the fact that we ask Bridget Hadley to occasionally give us the TIF 101 education update. I think we got a little bit more of that today and a little bit more detail. So I think we got TIF 201 today, and I appreciate both Bridget and Mr. Beller and their explanation for those that are here or viewing some of those further details of how TIF actually works. But needless to say that when you have an over $500 million end investment project valuation and a net increase valuation of anywhere from 420 to 450 million, I think that's a win for the city. It adds 3,200 full and part-time jobs. And what's not factored into the property taxes is with those jobs there are employment taxes, there are commercial activities and transactions taking place that spur and generate sales tax, which is helpful to the state as well as the city. You have 40 acres of a true mixed development at a historic crossroad of Omaha. Marty Hoskin mentioned earlier something today that it was Chip James that said that. I do remember that at the original press conference when this was kind of kicked off, that this is our community room. It may not be the geographic center of Omaha anymore, but I think it's kind of the heart and soul of Omaha at 72nd and Dodge. And I think the investment that Chip and Frank are trying to make in this legacy development is not only commendable, but it will serve Omaha for future generations. And again, that spillover activity that will be generated by this investment, I think, is immeasurable. So you have 1.7 million square feet of improvements to this area for commercial, residential, office, entertainment. And I wanted, and was mentioned maybe by some that said, you already see activity happening on the site before this has been approved. Well, the reason for that is because the developers have put their risk on the line. They are willing to make that, I'll say gamble, it's not a gamble, but I mean, they are willing to put their capital at risk in order for this project to move forward. If it weren't approved today, that's their risk. But I'm hopeful, I think optimistic that we'll see this be passed today and see the tremendous activity that will result not only on this northwest corner of 72nd and Dodge, but the whole surrounding area as well. I'll also close, as Councilman Festerson said, or close on affordable housing. And he mentioned some of the numbers, which I think are important, is that even if, look, the reality is we don't have the ability to, if you will, force a affordable housing component in this project because it doesn't exist today. But in addition, I think we need to look at really the broader scope and how to really make an impact on affordable housing in Omaha. And by requiring a percentage of a project within a CRA area, which is generally really mostly east of 72nd or east of 42nd Street, and in some cases as far west as 72nd Street, and in pockets further out west, but generally east of 42nd Street, I think that's not a comprehensive plan to address the issue. So affordable housing is an issue. It's not what we're discussing today, but know that the president of the council and Mr. Festerson and I, who sit on the planning committee, are taking the matter very seriously and looking for comprehensive ways to address what's been said is an 80,000 unit deficit. So I'll yield the floor at this point and hope that I'm sure we'll see this development move forward and all the other attributes and development that it will spur around this common room of our community at 72nd and Dodge. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Harding. Councilmember Melton, you're recognized.
Thank you, and thank you, Bridget. If Bridget Hadley, you always do such a great job with the TIF. Yet every week we tend to have people that still don't quite understand TIF, and what I want to say is the risk is on the developers in this case. However, I have no doubt that this development is going to be successful because of the prior developments of both these developers who have done a great job, who've had developments in other areas of our city and surrounding our city, and it's benefited. It benefits all of us. It doesn't have to necessarily be in our district. When you have a development like this at 72nd and Dodge, this is also going to spur development all around this area. And by the way, for people who care about their taxes and having their property taxes go up, this is how we keep property taxes from going up. We expand the revenue base so that we're collecting more money from development. This is the best way to grow our city and continue to pay for our essential city services and not increase taxes to do it. This project and the majority of the TIF expenses that are going into it, it's the public that's going to benefit. It's a lot of infrastructure in here. And so I think it's really important to note that there is no risk. My constituents and the people who testified as opponents, their property taxes will not be paying this back, even if it fails. And so I wanted to just make sure we address that. This is a loan from a bank to the developers. So the citizens of Omaha are not on the hook if for some reason it fails. However, I look at this project, the thought that went into this project, the traffic studies, everything that everybody looked at, and then worked with the surrounding communities, worked with Mode Shift, looked to see what can we do in this project that not only benefits us and our development, but benefits the community as a whole. Adding the bicycle stations and making sure that there's parking there, expanding some of the sidewalks to make them wider. I mean, those are all things that I think is going to make the project better, but that we don't often always see developers do. So I think that's incredible, and I love to see the senior living component here that we don't see. We see a lot of multifamily, but in this area, we need more of the senior living. So I think the concept of having it be multi-use all over in this area it's a great vision that I look forward to seeing come to fruition, because it really is going to make Omaha a better place to live for all of us. And here you can have a live, work, and play, another development, which I think is great as well. So I want to thank everybody for the cooperation. And again, if there's a project that we know wouldn't happen but for the tax increment financing, which we're always asking ourselves, would this happen but for TIF? I think the last 11 years have proved It's not going to happen without it. So this would be an example of where we really need TIF to make a development like this happen. So thank you all.
Thank you, Councilmember Melton. Vice President Palermo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, a lot of thank yous been given today, and I want to say thank you to the mayor for sticking around. We deal with a lot of development in town, and she's still here hanging on, listening to this one. And there's a reason for it. It's important. Like you've heard before, if you were born and raised in Omaha, the Crossroads was the place to be at one time. And I can honestly say within the last 10 to 15 years, I had no reason to go there. And that's not how it should be, right? Geographically, thinking about it, it's not the center of the city anymore, but it truly still is for many different intentions that take place. So this build, this construction, this development, it checks all the boxes as developments should, right? I mean, for me, you're investing in the urban core. I can still consider this the urban core, which is desperately needed. You're helping to improve on transportation, which is an ongoing issue that we need to continue working on. And another part of this, when you talk about just the sheer mass and numbers of what's going to happen, you're creating jobs. And these are big factors on how you improve and change the quality of life of people. So for the development team who's on this side of the chamber, from what I notice, there's a labor team on this side of the chamber. You folks should get together because you could help each other out in many ways on making this project work. So when we talk about attracting talent, retaining talent, these are the projects we need to have. And I remember months ago in another update on this project, I had said fingers crossed because for 11 years it has been fingers crossed on this vital, important piece of property here in the city of Omaha. And I'm happy to say that although my fingers are still crossed, I believe we're much closer to where we need to be on this important piece of property here in Omaha. So thank you to the developers. And I can keep talking while the president's busy if I need to, just to let him get back.
Thank you. That's not a good wingman. I don't know who is. Councilmember Brennan, you're recognized.
So we all have stories about Crossroads. I remember going there shopping with my mom as a child. I worked at, well, what Target is now used to be Yonkers department store, and I worked in the Liz Claiborne department there many, many years ago when I was in college. And that's a trip down memory lane in itself. Not too long ago, my son Zachary and I were driving home from church, and we had decided to go downtown for church, and we're driving back west. And he goes, "Mom, what's Crossroads?" And I said, "Well, it used to be a really cool place. I used to hang out there all the time. I used to work there." He goes, "Let's go see it." We walked in the mall. It was complete. I mean, I'd never seen anything like that. Music playing, like all the shops were still open in the background, but a complete ghost mall. Nothing in there. The escalators are running, everything, but nothing there. And I'll never forget kind of the sadness I felt because remembering how wonderful and lively and bustling it used to be, and there's just nothing there. So I just sort of wanted to share that because that really used to be the heart of the city. And I think it can become so again. And so while I know there are a lot of people that have questions about TIF and they don't understand it, and I applaud everybody who has worked together on this project because I do think that the risk will be worth it. We cannot, as a city, afford to let this sit empty anymore. We have to do something with this area, and I know this investment will be worth every penny.
Thank you, Councilmember Brennan. I would just add a few thoughts. First of all, as I was listening to a constituent, Ms. Teft, speak, I thought, on so many fronts in terms of what I hear from constituents in seeking a more pedestrian, bike-friendly city and a city that welcomes and promotes alternative transportation. what you heard her say is what, in fact, so many people in District 3 tell me regularly. Hearkening back to this being the center for the First Amendment expression for so many of our citizens over a spectrum of causes, as Mr. James said, just anecdotally, I'll never forget, and I hope we have this situation again someday soon, but a lot of people know my former law partner, Mike Kelly, and he said to me that he doubted Scott Frost had the capability of winning a national championship. And so we made a wager that if they won, he would don this number 7 jersey and go to 72nd and Dodge and wear it. And you know the story on that one. He talked Michigan out of the exclusive national championship, and Nebraska shared one that year. So I hope Mr. Frost can do it again, and everyone can meet back down there when this place opens. But in terms of what we see here, and I asked Mr. Beller to put this image back up because it's where the day began in my opening remarks. If you, after listening to what we heard, after seeing this vision conceptually of what we hope this will be, you cannot, I think, look at this without a sense of optimism and thanks to the enormous investment that the ownership team is making to create 3,200 new jobs in our city with an enormous growth in property tax base that will return on their investment to the city many-fold over where it stands today. And at the heart of the way tax increment financing works, in taking what had been devolving over decades, not, we look at the last 10 years, but actually what was happening at the Crossroads was for a long period of time before that even. And what this is going to transform into, it is indeed transformative. And to take property taxes, which today are at $300,000 per year and decreasing, what would we have, it was asked, if this land was scraped? We'd have even less than $300,000 in property taxes, because it would be in the developer's interest to eliminate the improvements that no one wants to rent anyway, because the property taxes that they pay are based upon a valuation that it assumes those improvements sit on the property and are capable of being leased. So the 300 would be going down, folks. And instead, what we're going to have is an eventual return through their investment of many millions. And if that's not a return on investment, I don't know what is. And just to say again, if you understand how the increment and TIF works, it takes the value today and the property tax valuation that's set in year 1, and it projects forward, and the increment is the value from which public improvement tax increment financing can be taken, and in this case, less than 15% over 15 years, and pays the difference between what they're paying now in taxes and what they will be paying in taxes, and it helps finance the project and these public improvements. And I think it was Mr. Beller who went into great detail to talk about the miles of sidewalks and the mile of streets and the acreage of public assembly and benefit and civic purposes areas within the project. And it says, this is how we're spending the money. And this is, you will get this city. We're dedicating this for the public. And we welcome you all in, whether you're mourning, whether you're protesting, whether you're celebrating, through the spectrum of life's events and purposes. And they want it to happen here, whether you take the bus, whether you take your car, whether you take your bike, or whether you walk. This is a fabulous example of that public-private partnership that Mr. Boozer said that our city is known for nationally. This is the way it works, and I'm delighted to support it. At this time, Mr. Festerson, you have your light on, but I will announce to the council and those in attendance that it has been requested that we move to item 75 at the conclusion of this item. It will be my intention to do that unless there's an objection. And I would note that how ironic that so many people are in the room in the building trades. and I welcome our members of the building trades here today. Mr. Festerson.
We want a separate vote on both 8 and 9, so I'll go ahead and motion approval for number 8.
Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 8 is approved 7-0.
Motion to approve item number 9.
Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 9 is approved 7-0.
Without objection, we'll proceed to item 75. Madam Clerk, would you please read it up?
Item 75, an ordinance to add sections 10-150 to 10-155 entitled Contractor Provisions to Chapter 10 of the Omaha Municipal Code to provide for rules and regulations for bids and the award of contracts in the amount exceeding $100,000. A is amendment of the whole requested by the Law Department.
The public hearing on item 75 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Mr. Martinez.
Good afternoon, Christian Espinosa, Human Rights and Relations Department, answering any questions you have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Thank you, Council President Jerem, and members of the City Council. My name is Ron Kaminsky. Address is 11312 Fowler Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska. I am the president of the Omaha and Southwest Iowa Building and Trades Council and chairman of the Contractors, Laborers Training and Apprenticeship Board. I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to speak today. Before I begin, I would like to recognize all the contractors, workers, and instructors here today. There's a broad support for this ordinance, and I'd like them to thank them for being here. We're here to support this important ordinance for lots of reasons, but I'd like to touch on just a few. First, this ordinance protects the workers who work for contractors who do work for the City of Omaha by making sure these employees are protected and that their employer is following all local, state, and federal laws. It also ensures that they are not paid under the table or misclassified as independent contractor in order to cheat the City of Omaha out of tax revenue. Second, this ordinance protects local companies who play by the rules. Companies that year after year have been providing job opportunities, following all the rules, doing the right thing, only to lose bid after bid or choose not to bid on work with the city at all because of cheating contractors being able to undercut them. This ordinance levels the playing field and creates more competition. Third, apprenticeship utilization. The City of Omaha and surrounding areas are in a construction boom that will continue and likely increase for at least the next 15 to 20 years. Local construction companies are extremely busy, and it is getting tougher and tougher by the day to find qualified workers to help local contractors grow. That leads out-of-state companies getting these contracts and bringing in out-of-state workers. With this ordinance, we can help build a larger qualified workforce, provide more job opportunities for the residents who live here, pay taxes by providing an incentive to our local contractors. Finally, we'd like to thank Councilman Gray for introducing this important ordinance that will not only help protect Omaha workers and contractors, but will help create a stronger workforce and a level playing field for contractors who have been doing it the right way. Once again, thank you.
Thank you. And before we have the next proponent, the clerk's going to just adjust the screen. Thank you. Next proponent, please.
Good afternoon, Council President Jerem and council members. My name is Evan Schmeitz, 5410 Weir Street, Omaha, Nebraska 68117. I'm speaking today on behalf of Omaha Federation of Labor President Senator Mike McDonald. Part of my job involves working in communications at the Omaha Fed. We are the local Central Labor Council of the AFL-CIO covering Douglas, Sarpy, Cass, Washington, and Burt counties. We represent 43 unions and over 11,000 workers here in the Omaha metropolitan area. The Omaha Federation of Labor has been advocating on behalf of middle-class families and workers since 1887. Thank you for allowing me to speak today, and thank you for all the other folks in attendance here today. I have a letter from the Omaha Fed that I would like to read in for the record. Dear President Jerem and esteemed council members, the Omaha Federation of Labor is here today to support this important Ordinance 42440. The ordinance, otherwise known as Contractor Compliance Ordinance, is an important piece of the overall puzzle of building and retaining a skilled, qualified workforce in the Omaha metropolitan area. This ordinance levels the playing field for local contractors and bidders while protecting workers who work for contractors. At a bare minimum, contractors and subcontractors should follow all state, local, and federal laws. This includes properly classifying employees. Another important aspect of this ordinance is that it protects local contractors and subcontractors who do a good job and play by the rules. Awarding contractors to the lowest, most responsible bidder, while also taking into account apprentices, will allow our local mom and pop companies to compete for these contracts. When local companies win bids, it stimulates the local economy as workers and owners spend dollars here. Local employees spend their paychecks on local mortgages, local vehicle payments, local restaurants, local businesses, and local utility companies. The best friend of small Main Street businesses is a well-paid workforce. I also want to highlight the fact that Ordinance 42440 adds in a great deal of waiting for apprentice utilization. At the present moment, a great deal of these skilled trade jobs are occupied by baby boomers. As they retire, we have many jobs to fill. According to local labor organizations, for every 3 openings in a skilled trade, there is only 1 qualified applicant. This ordinance is one step in the right direction as we work on growing our employee base here in the Omaha metro area. In conclusion, we'd like to extend our sincere appreciation to Councilman Gray for his work on this important ordinance and for his dedicated service to the great city of Omaha. Ordinance 42440 will create a stronger workforce, level the playing field for local contractors, and protect Omaha workers. Sincerely, Mike McDonald. That concludes our letter. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and please consider voting in support of this important ordinance.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents wishing to be heard?
Good afternoon, President Jerem, City Council members. My name is Dan Hughes, 8946 L Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68127. I'm a business rep with Electricians Local 22. I'm here on behalf of Local 22 to show our support for the contractor provisions that Councilman Gray has introduced. The testimony by Ron and Evan reflect our views as it affects our industry, and we would urge council to support this new language as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Good afternoon. Matt Scott, 704 Glen Arbor Circle, Lincoln, Nebraska. I represent the Carpenters Union up here in Omaha and the Millwrights Union. We have 3 locals up here, approximately 1,200 members, and a third of them are apprentices. It's extremely hard to get a contractor to put an apprentice on right now because it's expensive. It costs money to put an apprentice on and train him to do what we do as craftsmen. What these guys are talking about with the payroll fraud and the tax fraud and the worker misclassification is a very real issue here, and the Carpenters would love to support this and for you guys to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Luis Jimenez, 3306 Burt Street. Hello, councilors. I understand the Human Rights and Relations worked on the contract provisions or the contractor rules, on the amendment of the whole. There are 2 different things that occur. It's the apprentice utilization and the contracts in general, besides penalties for non-compliance. These changes are intended to encourage companies that bid on city projects that are not using federal or state money to use apprentices in at least 10% of their bid. For purposes of considering the particular bid to other bids, the city will reduce the bid by 5%. This may have the effect of encouraging new people and young people to enter the trades as companies take the initiative to hire them. This will make it financially beneficial for a variety of people to enter the trades and work for construction companies. The changes will require companies that are using city contractors to protect their employees, properly ensuring that they are being paid above board, that they are not using independent contractors when they should be using employers, that they are actually using worker compensation insurance. Something that might happen, because it does happen, is that companies will use independent contractors to perform when they should be using employees to work for the work, to avoid responsibility when a safety issue happens. The amendment changes the contract from 100,000 to 500,000. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Seeing none, we'll move to opponents. The public hearing is closed. Councilmember Gray, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, first of all, this issue came to my attention about 2 or 3 years ago. Well, actually, it came to the attention of myself and Councilmember Melton about 2 or 3 years ago when we were both sitting on the building commission, and we had a gentleman come in who was complaining about a number of individuals being paid under the table in cash and less than what they were worth. Councilmember Melton and I looked into that, and we made some necessary changes that needed to be made on the building commission. But as I talked to some of the contractors, this problem is much more pervasive than what we initially thought, so I began meeting with contractors, and let me thank the contractors for staying. I tried to get you away from the mask mandate, but I forgot about Crossroads. But thank you for your patience in waiting. But again, this came up, and we dealt with it on the building commission, and because of the urgency we felt of this problem, that I work with people to bring this ordinance to the council. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank Human Rights and Relations and Public Works, because when I first put the ordinance out there, I got a number of calls from them. So we all got together, we put something together that, and I think is going to be effective, and we may have to make some adjustments later on, but I think it's going to be effective, you know, in the long term, because what happened when we got finished with the ordinance, everybody was okay with it, but nobody was all the way happy. So that made me think we had a good ordinance in place, and there are some other things that we have to do with Human Rights and Relations that will be coming fairly soon. I promise you that, and I will maintain that. But this has been an issue that was much more significant than we initially thought. And in working with the contractors and working with Public Works and the Human Rights and Relations Department, I think we have a good ordinance to work with. I think it makes contractors more accountable, especially with the $200 million that will be coming in for streets and other things. It's important to make sure that our local contractors and our contractors in the region that they are playing by the same set of rules that others that may come in. So with that, I would ask your support for this particular ordinance, and I will move to approve.
No further lights? Roll call.
Festerson? Yes. Gray?
Yes.
Harding? Yes. Melton? Yes. Palermo?
Yes.
Brennan? Yes. Mr. President?
Yes.
Item 75 is approved, 7-0.
Amendment of the whole, did you?
Sorry.
The amendment of the whole is approved. Let's return to item 10.
Item 10, a resolution to approve the 22Q Senior Housing Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan located southeast of 23rd and Q Streets in an amount up to $450,000.
The public hearing on item number 10 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yeah, good afternoon. Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning, 1819 Farnham. Based on some of your comments with the previous TIF item, I'm hoping you'll like this one. It is a project that involves affordable housing.
Mr. Seaton, could you, I didn't hear what you just said. Could you repeat what the...
Okay.
This involves what kind of housing?
Affordable housing.
Oh, okay.
It's an affordable housing project. As I was kind of going off some of the comments made previously, it's new construction at 22nd and Q, approximately 40 units, senior living, senior apartments. It's actually a mixed income project with 32 units that have LIHTC funding. LIHTC is low income housing tax credits. Works very well with TIF. We've had that happen in a number of projects, and another large project will be coming your way in a couple weeks with LIHTC. There will be affordable housing TIF project. The developer is Rob Woodling. He's done a couple of LIHTC affordable housing projects in Omaha previously, as well as many within the region. The total project investment, and here's an elevation of the project, is on the site that was formerly occupied by a church and school known as St. Agnes. This is a $6.3 million project, very important in the neighborhood. Mr. Woodling is requesting $450,000 in TIF support, and this project meets the criteria of our TIF program. It's consistent with our city master plan. And if I may take just a real brief moment to jump on that TIF 101, 201 bandwagon, because it is important, I just want to reemphasize it. The money that goes into a TIF project is generated by the TIF project itself, okay? If the project didn't exist, the TIF money wouldn't exist for that project. And if a project falls apart, TIF project, the bank is out its loan, the developer is out of his equity, but the taxpayer is not out of anything. With that, I ask for your approval.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Don't forget your overlay. Your overhead.
Rob Woodling, Foundations Development, 1886 South 126th Street. Where did everybody go? Thank you for your time. Like Don said, this is a senior affordable housing project, 22nd and Q. 80% of the units will be affordable housing, and the remaining 20 will be for market rate residents, so there won't be any income restrictions on those units. This would be a project that we would hope to start coming very soon in the spring with approval, and would look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Woodland. You might stick around for a minute. Are there any other proponents or opponents on this item? The public hearing is closed. Vice President Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to say thank you. I know this is similar to another project on 14th and Center, I believe, with the same advantages and benefits that are desperately needed in this community. So, and they're both in District 4. Thank you for that. The neighborhood as well, my wife's family attended that church their whole entire life, so the sentiment of the neighborhood was, darn, our church is gone. But with what you're building there in this spot, in the need, it has alleviated a lot of that pain, knowing that it's desperately needed. So I appreciate it. I will keep finding you affordable dirt, keep doing what you're doing, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Palermo. Mr. Woodling, I just wanted to say I was a little bit surprised that the people who had been talking about advocating for affordable housing, it's unfortunate they couldn't stick around to hear your presentation on your development and support it. It was somewhat surprising to me that they I don't know if it was Star Trek and someone beamed them up somewhere else, but it seemed to be somewhat confusing to me why they wouldn't stick around with such an exciting project. But thank you for your investment.
Thank you.
Roll call. Oh, Councilmember Gray, your light is on. Did you wish to talk?
Well, yeah, just for a minute. I just wanted to thank Rob. First of all, he's been in District 2 already, and he's done a nice job over there with senior housing, and I think that facility is just about full, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay. So it looks like you're headed in the right direction, but I also wanted to thank you for that. I didn't want to share you with any of the other districts, but I guess I have to, so especially in District 4, because Mr. Palermo will get after me if I don't. So thank you for the work that you do in providing affordable housing, but I also want to thank you for being a valuable member of the Land Bank Board as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 10
thank
is
you for your
approved
time.
7-0.
Item 11, a resolution to approve the Elkhorn Landing Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan located at 20603 and 20605 Elkhorn Drive in an amount up to $985,609.
The public hearing on item 11 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yes, good afternoon. Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning, 1819 Farnham. We're going to go a little further west for this TIF project. It's a pair of parcels along Elkhorn Drive. This is Main Street Elkhorn here. These are the two parcels. There's one's vacant, one has a single family home. The site will be cleared, and a pair of mixed use, new construction. My apologies, I wasn't paying attention. A matching pair of new construction mixed-use buildings will be constructed. The upper levels will include 7 residential units, 6 are apartments in each, 7 each. 6 are apartments, 1 is a condominium for sale unit. The main level of each building will be commercial or retail. There will be, in addition to the building, they're going to construct about 24 parking stalls along Elkhorn Drive as a public improvement. This project is about, it also is about $6.3 million in investment in the Elkhorn area. They're requesting $985,609 in TIF support. It's been reviewed by the TIF committee and the planning board, and we ask for your approval.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Good afternoon, Michael Sands, 1700 Farnham Street, on behalf of the applicant. Don did a great job of outlining the project as always, so I just wanted to say on behalf of my client, it's been a long road, but they've used that time well and wisely, working with the city, with the Elkhorn BID, to really create a project that I think everybody will be really happy with, and they're excited to get that going. Also wanted to thank Councilman Harding for meeting with my client and providing input and feedback. They certainly appreciated that. With that, I humbly ask for your support, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sands. Councilmember Harding.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tyler, I don't know if you wanted to say anything, but I'll just say on behalf of both the BID and the developer, this is, I think, a great example of people coming together to sit down, have good conversations, to think about alternative solutions. And I think we found a good compromise at the end of the day that works with the BID, that works with all the great things that are happening in Main Street, Elkhorn. And for this project, I think it'll be additive to the energy that's being created in the downtown Elkhorn area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. I would just point out, this is a really good project. Will it actually be within the geographic boundaries of the BID, or are you open to? That's terrific.
Yes, it is.
You know, we keep hearing from real estate gurus like Councilmember Harding and BID pioneers like Councilmember Festerson about the growth power that is unleashed in business districts when BIDs are formed. And we've seen it in Old Town Elkhorn, we've seen it in, of course, Dundee and Benson, Blackstone, and soon, hopefully, on the North 24th Street corridor that just formed one, and hopefully soon in the South 24th Street corridor in District 4. And 2 council members on here, a little work to do in District 7 and District 5. But thanks to your please relay the thanks to your client for their investment and working collaboratively to continue the energy in Elkhorn.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Was that a motion, Mr. Harding, or just, okay? Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 11 is approved, 7-0.
Item 12, an application to consider a Class C liquor license for the Nowhere Bar located at 3502 Leavenworth Street. Ace Communications in opposition.
The public hearing on item 12 begins at this time, and the applicant is registered by video conference. Mr. Cortez.
Hello.
You're recognized.
Okay, yeah, hello. I'm Eric Cortez. I'm the owner of the Nowhere Bar on 3502 Leavenworth Street. Reason why I want my liquor license is honestly I see Leavenworth being a thriving community. Honestly, like you got Blackstone and Farnham. I see Leavenworth one of these days getting to that point. I would honestly, I don't want to be just recognized as just another bar on Leavenworth Street. I'm here more for the community also. I would like to hold events in the neighborhood, donate to the Jackson Elementary School, as in like jerseys, anything that school supplies, gather people around the neighborhood to do cleaning, pick up trash, the park, Leavenworth Park, go around, clean. I think it's not all about revenue for me. It's more about a community thing and watching Leavenworth thrive one of these days, and I'd like to be part of that. And that is why I want my liquor license. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Stick around.
Okay.
Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Mr. Cortez, I represent that district, and I just let you know that when your application came through, I received communications of concern and communications in opposition from neighbors in that part of Leavenworth, which, by the way, the area you say you wish to see come back someday, that's had an amazing redevelopment process going on. So it's very much alive and well, and that's why there's so much heightened interest in what happens on Leavenworth, because there's already a number of liquor outlets in that area, and the neighbors are concerned with adding another one at 35th, so close to the Down Under Lounge and the Quick Shop, as well as the other liquor outlets in the area. They're concerned about yours. So I took a deeper dive on your application, admittedly, and was concerned to see, in terms of your experiences, what I consider to be the lack of experience, which led me to a deeper dive, which led me, believe it or not, to Sarpy County Court, where I happen to see you have a trial pending tomorrow before Judge Wester for aggravated DUI, refusing to take the breath test, and traveling in excess of 25 miles per hour, which led to your stop, presumably, in the probable cause. But that wasn't the first thing I saw on your record. I saw other things that were concerning to me. So I wondered why someone with a demonstrated representation of their inability to comply with the law and the rules of the road and the commands of a police officer who requested that the operator of a motor vehicle pulled over pursuant to a lawful stop would not have obeyed his order to take the preliminary breath test that operators of motor vehicles in this state give their implied consent to do as a part of those privileges. And that led me to have concern that, would this operator follow the liquor license laws? Is this person in their proper state of mind or legal capacity to be doing that? And is this something that's really in the best interests of this still at risk but transforming area of our city? And so the first thing I'd ask you is it in fact your trial tomorrow to Judge Wester?
Yes.
Yeah. A little background about Judge Wester. As I heard, it's a bench trial to Judge Wester?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So, we don't have the requirement that we Mirandize you here, but, anything you say in this proceeding can and will be used, or you must assume that it will in that proceeding in Sarpy County tomorrow.
Okay.
But if you don't answer my questions, that's just going to, for me in this venue, to me, signify that by the standards that I operate and this body operates, that is probably a presumption that at least more likely than not, and certainly by clear and convincing evidence in my mind, that you did commit the offenses, and therefore it would be probably not best for you to have a license at this time. Do you understand my position?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you understand why I would have that concern?
Yes, I understand it. And I've also taken gone to like AA classes twice a week. I've taken like counseling that they recommended me to do for like liquor evaluations. I've done all that. I think what happened with me, it was just, it was worse. It was bad timing for me because honestly, I've always wanted to have a bar, and for me, that was really bad timing for me, and kind of regret all this that happened. But I have taken consideration that all this stuff, it falls back on me at the end of the day, and that's why I've taken these AA classes and all this stuff that was recommended for me to just to look a little bit better, for my court date tomorrow. So, but I understand everything what you guys are saying.
Yeah, and this pending charge isn't the only thing on your record, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's this combination, and I know you're a young guy. You're 25 years old?
Yes.
You got a long, hopefully bright life ahead of you, and you can get through this issue with alcohols. But I just think it would be a good time for you to get through those issues, get your life turned around, and have a demonstrated period of demonstration of being a good, law-abiding citizen and responsible before I support your application. So I want to tell you a couple things, and I've avoided asking you questions that would make you potentially put yourself at risk for incriminating yourself even further. But if you were to request us to withdraw your application at this time, you wouldn't have, in the event that there's a motion to recommend denial to the commission and a subsequent denial by that commission of your liquor license application, you'd have a clean slate, so to speak, in terms of being able in the future to not have that red flag or check mark of concern in a future application. But if you move forward and there's a motion to deny here today, and that does pass, and the Liquor Commission follows that application, that recommendation, then it would be more challenging for you to overcome that, in my experience, in the future. So with that understanding, do you wish the council to move forward and make a recommendation today on your liquor license, or do you wish to request that you withdraw your application at this time? You can always refile it at a later date.
Oh. So I guess I kind of what you said the first time. You recommend me just withdrawing? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't represent you, but what prior applicants in your position have done when these sorts of issues and concerns come to light, they make a personal decision that they'd rather have a no record of a denial on their license and withdraw their application so that that doesn't happen, rather than move forward and get a negative recommendation. So the choice is yours, though. If I were in your position, I would withdraw my application.
Okay.
But the choice
Okay,
is
then.
yours.
Yeah. I guess that's fine. I guess I'll just withdraw for right now and probably reapply maybe down the future or something.
I think that's a wise decision, and it keeps, at your relatively young age, your options open in the future. And because we've had other people who have done that, who come back in a few years, and they have a demonstrated track record of turning their life around and really becoming model citizens who live productive lives and have successful businesses, including liquor licenses. So we would need a motion to allow withdrawal.
Okay, and another question too is, I have like my parents going in on this business with me as well. If I were to withdraw like my name from ownership of the bar, is there any way they could possibly take ownership?
Well, I can't give you legal advice, but one thing that could happen is another individual could apply. That person could be related to you. If you, however, are going to have involvement in this business, that could raise concerns when their liquor license is considered. And what I would recommend you do, if that's what they intend to do, is to get an attorney who can advise you in this matter. There are people, a number of lawyers who do liquor law in the Omaha area and in Lincoln, and sit down and talk to them and get the benefit of their expert opinion. But at this time, if your proposed landlord would be Mr. Palladino, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so if he has any questions about you withdrawing and giving you a hard time, just send them my way, would you?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, I can't promise you any satisfaction there, but I believe I know him well enough to talk to him about why this is the best decision for him and for you.
Okay.
Second? No further lights, roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 12, 7 is approved, 7-0.
Item 13, an application to consider a Class C liquor license for Cross Strain Brewing located at 1229 Millwork Avenue. A's communication from the Planning Department regarding permits for the outdoor area.
The public hearing on item 13 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? We have Scott Strain, the applicant, by Zoom. We will unmute you, Mr. Strain, so you can begin talking. And just so when you make your remarks, Mr. Strain, there is a requirement that since there's an outdoor area that you understand that this will be, if recommended for approval, contingent upon permits. But please proceed.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much, council members. Scott unfortunately had to step away due to the length of the nature of the meeting thus far. He asked that I step in his place and answer any questions.
Right.
My name is Doug Mascurta.
And what's your address?
926 South 51st Ave.
Would you please spell your last name for the clerk?
Not a problem. It's V as in Victor, E-S-K-E-R-N-A.
All right. Are you the brewmaster?
No, I'm the general manager. Our brewmaster is actually brewing today, Bobby.
All right. What would you like to say?
So we're applying for our second location, our second tap room. Our first one is located in La Vista off 108th and Giles. The second one that we were going for here is in the Millwork Commons area, kind of commonly referred to as the Builders District. We are specifically going to go in the Aston building It's the one with the multicolored water tower on it right now. It's gone through a great renovation. We think that is a great up-and-coming area. As we know, there are several apartment complexes going up in that area. One right across the street is going up. We think it'll be a very valuable member of that area, and we think we can provide something to that. So I'll actually just open up to any questions.
Thank
if anybody
you.
has any.
Thank you. We'll let you know. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Councilmember Gray, did you wish to say anything or just make a motion?
I'll just make a motion.
Public hearing is closed.
Public hearing, I'll make a motion to approve and thank you for coming into the Millwork Commons area. It is an up and coming and a growing area, and hopefully you will fit right into that. So thank you for recognizing the importance of that particular part of the community, and I hope you do well. Motion to approve.
With a contingent upon permits?
Contingent upon permits.
Roll call.
Festerson. Gray.
Yes.
Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 13 is approved, 7-0.
Item 14, an application to consider a Class C liquor license for the Corner Kick located at 681 North 132nd Street.
The public hearing on item 14 begins at this time. We'll start with proponents, and we have Shauna DeFord representing the applicant by video conference. Ms. DeFord, you're recognized. We'll need your name and address.
My name is Shauna DeFord. The location is 681 North 132nd Street in Omaha.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I know we are requesting for a Class C liquor license due to the fact that we hold tequila dinners. We have unique tequilas that we'd like to bring in, infuse them in our dishes, and would like to be able to offer those to our guests as they come in that they can purchase and take home.
Thank you. Is that all you wish to say?
Yes.
And I'm sure you're happy to answer any questions.
Yes, happy to answer any questions.
Great. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 14 is approved, 7-0.
Item 15, an application to consider a Class I liquor license for M. Vince Nail Spa located at 10335 Pacific Street, Suite 12A.
The public hearing on item 15 begins at this time. We'll begin with the proponent, Morgan Gurung, representing the applicant, 10335 Pacific Street. You're recognized, Ms. Gurung.
Yes, good afternoon, guys. Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Morgan Gurung. I'm the managing partner for M. Vince Nail Spa at 1 Pacific Place in Omaha, Nebraska, at 1 Pacific Place. I have been in the hospitality industry for 20 years. I have managed the Hilton, Marriott, and the Hyatt properties as a general manager for 20 years. Me and my wife had decided to open the luxurious, one-of-a-kind M. Vince Nail Spa in Omaha. This is our first location, and we have applied for the liquor license, and here I am. So I'm very happy to answer any questions you guys may have for me.
If this doesn't work, you may consider a career in creative marketing writing. That was, how could someone not be excited about your business after hearing that description? Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 15 is approved, 7-0.
Good luck.
Item 16, an application to consider a Class I liquor license for Scissors and Scotch Exarban located at 6750 Mercy Road, Suite 3.
The public hearing on item 16 begins at this time. The first proponent is the applicant, Nancy Meduna, 6750 Mercy Road. Ms. Meduna, you're recognized.
Good afternoon. This is Nancy Meduna. I'm looking to get a second location for Scissors and Scotch. We have one in Shops of Legacy and would like to expand to Exarban location. So this would be our second one. The address is 6750 Mercy Road, suite number 3. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Second, roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 16 is approved, 7-0.
Good luck.
Item 17, an application to consider a Class D liquor license for Ready Mart located at 4525 Center Street. A's Communications in opposition.
The public hearing on item 17 begins at this time. We'll open with the proponent applicant, Mr. Neil Armani, 4525 Center Street. Mr. Armani, you're recognized. Make sure you unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. Yes, I am Neil Armani, and I'm representing Dina Mart, DBA Ready Mart, at 4525 Center Street, Omaha, Nebraska.
Welcome, Mr. Armani. Stick around. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Mr. Armani, I have a few questions. First, this is a location that's within a couple blocks of where I live. And first of all, I want to thank you for your investment in purchasing the property from the Bertagni family, who operated a gas station repair shop for many, many years at that location. And in fact, one of the boys who came through the Bertagnis at that station is a priest, and comes back once a year or so and speaks at our parish from his overseas missions. So there's a real connection to that location. And of course, there's heightened concern, as you've recognized from the people who have written into us and who have contacted me about wondering and worrying about what might happen there. So part of what I'm going to do is ask you some questions to learn from you about what you plan to do, what's going to happen at the location of the property, and about your experience. So first of all, it's my understanding this is not your first venture into this business. You have other locations, is that correct?
Yes, I do.
And you have experience in convenience stores with gas made available for people to purchase, right?
That's right. That's correct.
And you have a good operating record, is that correct?
That's right. I appreciate it. Yes, I do.
Are these stores owner operated, or do you hire people who are in charge of the stores and you're kind of a hands-off operator? Is it hands-on or hands-off?
It's going to be hands-on. It'll be me running that operation.
Okay. Now, another thing that people are concerned about is not knowing you and not knowing the type of business you run. They express fear that there will be a lot of bars and cages and security like that, and it won't be a very welcoming place for people to have a sense of, a business they want to go to because they're worried about what might happen there. What kind of physical environment are you going to have?
I have complete agenda, Mr. President, that how I'm going to operate that business. First of all, number one, I will be posting the sign on the property, no alcohol consumption allowed on the premises. Person doing so will be prosecuted. Number two, open container of alcohol is not allowed on the premises, and that person will be prosecuted. Drinking at the property is illegal, and training. I will be given training to my staff and myself too, to make sure whoever's serving alcohol there, they are proper trained, and they've checked their IDs and make sure they're not selling alcohol to minors. And also, I will post a sign on the property, inside or outside, that I'm not gonna serve a liquor wine Sunday till noon, because I respect the church in a neighborhood. And also, I will post a sign, it's legal to sell alcohol to any underage minor under 21. And if the penalty doing so, it will be imprisonment for 1 year or fine up to $1,000. And also, I will make a sign law prohibiting alcohol sales to intoxicated person. And proper alcohol serving training will be given to my staff also, like I mentioned before. And also, it is, I will post the sign, it is unlawful to serve alcohol any under age of 21, and pregnancy can be birth defects. Because I have a liquor store, I never had any problem there. And also, I have 3 liquor licenses in the state of Nebraska, and I have a 1 liquor license state of Iowa.
Thank you.
And
now, Mr. Armani, I have a couple more questions for you. Are you aware that there is a high school, 2 elementary schools, and a middle school within 8 blocks of your business?
Yes, I do.
And part of what happens is that the students walk by your business going to and from those schools. So there's students who go to the Norris Middle School to the south of your business, and there's students who go to the Beals Elementary, Holy Cross Elementary, and Mercy High School to the north of your business. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I do.
And so it's not unforeseeable that those children will be in your store, whether to purchase a pack of gum or some candy or whatever, but there'll be some others who might be tempted to try to purchase alcohol. And it sounds like you have a real good system for preventing that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. President. But I have assigned the liquor area behind the counters, and there is nobody have approached to grab the bottles or grab alcohol bottles and buy it. I was the only one, or my employee will be the only one to have access to grab bottle. With that, we're gonna replace the liquor on designated area. Everybody has access to grab the liquor's bottle from there.
Now, one question, if I don't ask, I'm going to get in trouble with my wife and some of her friends. I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's a farmer from, I think, Utan or just west of Omaha, who has come into Omaha during the summers and sold their fresh-grown produce on the west side of the building, where the parking lot goes to the south towards the retaining wall. Are you aware of that? The fresh produce, the farmer that was set up on the property for many years?
I did not get this information from previous owner, but he didn't mention to me about that farmers selling daily produce there.
Yeah,
but
there was one farmer.
I will consider to it.
And I think she paid rent to Mr. Bertagni for the right to locate there. And I'm just saying it's a popular offering to the neighborhood, and many people stop in there to get fresh produce. So
okay.
I will ask Mr. Bertagni, who I know very well, he lives a block from my house, to get you her contact information. And I'm glad to hear that you're open to that, because those sorts of offerings lend themselves to bringing more people to your store to then, come inside and purchase things or to buy gasoline, which you intend to continue selling. So that's all the questions I have for you at this time. And I know other people have told me they have questions, and we'll start with Vice President Palermo, but thank you.
I appreciate it, President. Thank you very, very much.
Vice President Palermo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And sir, I just have a couple questions for you. I know for some the make or break is the farmer markets, but not for me. But I do have a question. You have a bar/restaurant just to the east of you, and I remember driving by. It almost seems like you share a parking lot. So 2 questions. Have you met the owner of this bar? And the second part of that question is, what do you have in place to not get in the middle of a, well, it's his trash, not my trash, therefore we just have blowing trash around?
But I didn't get a chance to meet the owner on the across the street, the bar owners. But I think so my parking is a separate from their parking space. I have a complete parking lines on my property, which is faded, but I will do it again. And Steve did not mention to me that he shares the trash, his trash. And if it is concern, rise that, I will definitely take care of that. Even I have to get a big dumpster there, placed on the property, or even I have to draw the property line and do some parking lines over there, I will do that to minimize the problem, to run the operation smoothly there.
Okay, well, I appreciate that answer and your willingness to meet that neighbor close by. Can I ask you, who do you have with you in the screen there?
My wife.
Hi, my name is Roxana Armani. I'm Neil's wife.
Okay, well then.
She's my proponent too.
Yeah, I'm with him always. I know him. Maybe you don't know him, what kind of person he is, but he is perfect businessman and a wonderful husband. And he know what is the value of young kids. So he will take care of that really good, that problem. I mean, we never had any kind of problem before, and we will not have any kind of problem on this property too. I am 100% sure. Thank you.
Well, I am 100% sure that after hearing from you, I don't have any more questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would just tell you the name of the owner to the business to the east and the restaurant bar named Patty McGowan's is Dan Emsick, E-M-S-I-C-K. If you stop over at his business, I'm sure he'd like to meet you.
Sure, I will do that. I will do that, definitely.
What's the pleasure of the council? Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
No.
Item 17 is approved 6-1.
Your license has been approved 6-1. You go to the commission now. Good luck.
Item 18, an application to consider a Class K liquor license for the Broke Down Palace located at 8805 Maple Street. There is a request to postpone this item to the March 2nd, 2021 City Council meeting.
Before we vote, we've advertised this. If anyone came to speak on the public hearing on item 18, speak now or forever hold your peace. You're welcome to come back because we'll continue the public hearing as part of the motion. Was that part of the motion?
Yeah.
That was the second. Okay, roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion is approved 7-0.
Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
The public hearing on agenda items 19 through 23 were held on February 9, 2021. Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 19 to 23 are approved 7-0.
The public hearings on agenda items 24 through 69 are today. If you wish to address the City Council regarding these items, please come to the microphone and indicate the agenda item number you wish to address. Identify yourself by your name, address, who you represent, and if you are a proponent or opponent. First, we'll talk about people in the chamber.
I'll vote on it, but I'd like to make some comments about item 45.
Okay, well,
when we get there.
Okay. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to speak on the consent agenda resolutions? Come on down, give us your name, address, and the agenda item number you wish to speak.
My name is Steve Roby, 2860 Reynolds, and I'm here about the Alpine Inn. I didn't know if I need to come up here or not.
Are you the owner?
My father passed away, and so we're going through trying to keep the place open and keep the business going. And so I'm here to get the liquor license put in my name.
Manager application.
Thank you. And there's a few of us that stopped up there for lunch before the pandemic. Are you still open for lunch?
Yes, we are, and still have good chicken.
That's what I had when I was there. It is good.
Good choice.
Okay. It's worth the drive.
Yes, I appreciate you coming.
But there's no coons during the day out in the...
Not during the day. They don't come out usually till like in the evening time, or like when that real cold weather was out. They pretty much kind of hibernate that time.
Okay. Well, thank you for making the trip in.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else in the chamber wishing to speak on consent agenda resolutions? Seeing none, we have one person registered by video conference, so I don't see any there that's there anymore. Okay, the public hearing is closed. Councilmember Gray, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can we look outside real quick and see if Justin is still outside there? Justin Moore.
He's on the phone.
He waited this long, so I'm hoping that he's gone.
All right, Mr. Moore, welcome. We'll need your name and address. Mr. Gray has some questions for you.
Not questions.
Or comments.
Comments.
Name is Justin Moore. Address is 2821 Caldwell, Omaha, Nebraska 68131.
Welcome.
I really didn't have any questions for you, Justin. I just wanted to sing your praises for a minute, quite frankly. When we're talking about the small emerging business ordinance, this man started with a really small company, and if you have seen any of the work on Dodge Street or 72nd Street or Ames Street, replacing panels and doing some of the concrete work there, he's almost one of our go-to guys right now, Mr. Stubbe, am I right? He's one of our go-to guys.
He's giving you the thumbs up for the record.
And he purchased a property. It's the old J.F. Bloom building on Florence Boulevard in Ames, and he intends to make that his business area. It's on the National Register of Historic Places, or it's a historic building, and Mr. Moore has decided to go into there not only to continue developing his business, but he's making it so that other contractors can have office area in his space as well as storing some of their equipment. I just wanted people to see a success story from the small emerging business ordinance, Mr. President, that you, myself, and Mr. Festerson worked on way back when we first got on the council. He is one of those success stories that I just wanted to share with you all and talk to you about his efforts and his ongoing efforts, and just to thank him for sticking with the program. Thank you for doing the work that you do in the city of Omaha. Thank you for staying with the city sometimes when we had some issues, but we got past those, and I just want to take the opportunity to thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate the city too, so we definitely appreciate all the opportunity the city has given us, and they've been with us ever since we got past all our mishaps, and we're here where we are today, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore, how many employees are you up to now in season?
Probably about, altogether, probably about 35, maybe 40.
And what was it 5 years ago?
7.
Yeah. If that's not a testament to small and emerging small business ordinance and the power of city contracting and the work and effort that the departments put in, I see them here today, the Director of Public Works, Mr. Stubbe. I see Heather Tippy Pierce, who's worked so hard in that area, and HRR was here earlier. But, you know, what a success story.
Thank you. Thank you.
No further lights.
Motion approved.
Roll call.
Festerson. Yes. Gray.
Yes.
Harding. Melton. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 24 to 69 are approved 7-0.
Item 70, a resolution to approve change order number 6 with Tab Construction in the amount of $319,841.73 for additional work on the 78th Street improvement specific to Mercy Road project.
The public hearing on item 70 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 70 is approved 6-0. Councilmember Festerson abstains.
Item 71, an ordinance levying a special tax assessment for Weeds Group 2021-03. A is amendment of the whole requested by the Parks Department.
Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion is approved 7-0.
Item 72, an ordinance levying a special tax assessment for Litter Group 2021-04. A is amendment of the whole requested by the Parks Department.
Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion is approved 7-0.
Item 73, an ordinance levying a special tax assessment for Trees Group 2021-05. A is amendment of the whole requested by the Parks Department.
Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion is approved 7-0.
Item 74, an ordinance to amend Section 23-177 of the Omaha Municipal Code to add the employment classification for street maintenance manager. Personnel Board recommends approval.
The public hearing has been advertised on item 74. Is there any proponent or opponent?
We already had the public
Oh,
hearing.
we already
This
had
was
it. I
held
thought we
over.
I don't see any lights.
Vinny.
Vinny.
Vinny
Oh.
has his light on.
Okay, there you are. Thank you.
Thank you,
There's
Mr. President. I would just like to make a motion to lay over this agenda item until May 25th.
Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo.
Yes.
Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion is approved 7-0.
Item 76, an ordinance to acquire private property for the 108th Street Burt to Decatur Streets Public Improvements Project.
The public hearing on item 76 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Non-action items, items 77 through 100, do not require public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and/or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on agenda for consideration.
Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion is approved 7-0. Meeting is adjourned at 5:06.